開けるんだ開くのさその不思議な扉を登れるんだ登るのさ未来に触れるその心炸裂の富の節消えてゆく皆の命愛してる女性に裏切られ白涙が宇宙にさまよその行方さえも知らぬただただ自由に漂う登れるな登るのさ未来に触れるその心今私の富のさ熱く燃える富のさ正義の証富のさ敵を落とせ富のさ我らの我らの富のさ
Hello and welcome to Japanimation Station, an anime podcast brought to you by Sean Chapman.
And Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to peer into the delightfully deranged mind of Tomino Yoshiyuki with our Tomino-THON. This week on the show, we have a very exciting episode because we are today discussing what is almost certainly Tomino's most well-known and most revered non-Gundam show. That's right, we are today talking about Space Runaway Ideon, the 1980 sci-fi classic. Today we're talking about just the TV show, the 39-episode original show. We will be doing an episode next week on the movies, the Ideon A Contact and the Ideon Be Invoked. But there is more than enough of Ideon to talk about for this episode, and we can save the movies for that one. A decision I made when we started planning the season, and I'm very happy I made that choice, because yes, we got a lot to talk about today. This is one of the Ideon, or this is one of the Tomino shows that I have actually watched before that is one of the non-Gundam ones. So I have rewatched Space Runaway Ideon for this. I loved the show and originally watched it like 5 or 6 years ago. I love it even more now. It is an incredible show on rewatch in particular. Jonathan, this is your first experience invoking the Ide. How do you feel about it?
I love it. I think it's a fantastic show with the one asterisk that has to be here, which is to say, because to keep the podcast honest, I have only watched the TV show. So
yes.
The 39 episodes, I've not watched the movies. So I don't really feel like I've finished Ideon for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
We don't need to get to it yet, but the show is not, there is an ending. It's not the ending that was planned. So, and we will get to that with the movies, and I'm excited to see how they really wanted to wrap this thing up. But for the 39 episodes that we have here to talk about today, as existed by the time, 1981 rolled around and people in Japan were finishing this up on TV, I think this is an incredible show, and it's a show that surprised me so much, because obviously the show has a reputation, and I knew that it was well-liked, and all of that, as you say, probably the best known of his non-Gundam works. But I think I expected either something more similar to Gundam because it was made right after it, or something that went away from Gundam in a more commercial direction because Gundam was at the time that they made the original Ideon, Gundam was not yet a commercial success. It became a commercial success over the course of Ideon being, produced and broadcast, but Gundam was in some ways a commercial failure at the moment that they were planning this show. And so, in the same way that Zambot being a failure made Daitarn something very different and more kind of palatable for a mainstream audience, I kind of wondered if Ideon was going to be that. And when you just look at, the design of the Ideon, the monster, the robot itself, without any of the story context, I don't think you expect it to be as weird as this show is, because this is as aggressively weird and experimental a thing as Tomino has ever done. It goes so hard, it gets so dark, it doesn't even really have the pretext of being a kid's show, the way that, Gundam lightly gestures at with Haro. I guess you've got Deck's little squirrel in his cute little squirrel spacesuit. But mostly, like, Ideon is so out there. It takes itself in such an interesting direction. It has a lot more in common with, like, the Gundam novelizations than the actual Gundam TV show, if we're comparing it to Gundam at all. And so I was fascinated. I think it gets better and better and better as it goes along. And then it ends, but I'm excited to see where it goes after its quote-unquote ending.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It is the thing with Ideon where I think I had a similar experience when I first watched it, where I went in expecting, as you say, something that's either kind of fairly similar to Mobile Suit Gundam, or something that, as you say, is going in a more sort of commercial mainstream direction. But Ideon is the exact opposite, right? Like, Mobile Suit Gundam was a thing that I think where Tomino felt encouraged to let his freak flag fly, and he did that properly as a director for the first time in his career, and he just like let it all out there. And it didn't bring him commercial success, but it also did get him fired. And so he was like, well, okay then. And when he comes around to making Space Runaway Ideon, he goes even deeper. Not to say that I think I still prefer Mobile Suit Gundam as a show overall, because there's a weird alchemy to that show. But I think Ideon is a more Tomino show than Mobile Suit Gundam is. It is more in his sort of like id, it's digging deep into the mind, as for my kind of subtitle for this series, appearing in the delightfully deranged mind of Tomino Yoshiyuki. Space Runaway Ideon really is that, in this kind of profound way that I just adore, because there's just no, as you say, there's no pretext about making it accessible for a younger audience. It's a show where it just really feels like he doesn't give a fuck about that side of things at all. He is saddled with a big goofy robot because, as we'll get into the notes, he had no part in the making of that. He was given that design before he was on the show. And then he, makes one of the main characters laugh for like a solid minute at the design of the robot in the first episode. And then he proceeds from there to make the robot, like, by the end of the show, like one of the most horrifying, like almost pseudo cosmic horror kind of things you've ever seen in a show like this. Like, the Ideon is a legitimately like upsetting entity in the structure of the show by the time you're at the end of it. And it's just a show that, like, at a certain point, even though it has so many of the basic trappings of a like mecha show, at some point I don't even think of Ideon in the terms of, is it a super robot, is it a real robot? It's just not even either of those. It's its own thing. It just exists on its own bizarre island as this very unique series.
Sean, I wrote in my notes in episode 38, so the penultimate episode, this isn't a mecha show, this is a horror show. Yeah. And I think that is, if I had to pick one genre, this is a horror show in a really profound and interesting way. And yeah, I was describing Ideon to my brother earlier, and I said, it seems like the attitude of this show was, if you can't accept me at my Gundam, you don't deserve me at my Ideon, which is Tomino just like, he just goes so hard after, it really feels like, you look at Gundam and you think that Gundam is a show of leaving everything on the field, and I think it is. But then Ideon is like finding something even further inside yourself to leave on the field, just in case there was no other time to do it. And yeah, it is fascinating. It is also like an obvious, for me, like missing link in the path to something like Neon Genesis Evangelion or some later, more experimental mecha shows. And of all the Gundam shows, the one that's reminded me most of, by far, is Reconquista in G, which I think is like an interesting thing that we'll get back around to later. Now, G-Reco has a very different tone, but like stylistically and the way it's directed, I think there's a lot of affinity there. And yeah, I adored watching this show. I was horrified by it at various points in the way I think you're supposed to be. It has an amazing cast. And yeah, just the thought that, like, we've seen such development when you go from Triton to Zambot to Daitarn to Gundam, and I thought we would see more of a plateau once you get to Ideon, because it's like Gundam is such a leap. But no, this is also, I agree, I think Gundam is the better show, and I think Ideon has some like structural, not issues, but like it is messy, sometimes by intent in a way Gundam is not, but like it is still a leap, at least in ambition, and that is insane to see.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because obviously there's some other non-Gundam Tomino shows I have seen, Brain Powered and King Gainer, and I do think it's really interesting that for me, Ideon is clearly like of a piece with those in various ways stylistically, in a way that I agree with you that the Gundam show it most resembles to me is G-Reco. That there is something about the kind of like very intense, fractious nature of his narrative style that is inherent to the way that Tomino tells stories that he tended to rein in for his Gundam shows. I mean, very much for the original Mobile Suit Gundam, it's reined in the most. But even Zeta and Double Zeta, Char's Counterattack, Turn A Gundam starts going more in that direction. But those ones, you know, they're fucking crazy compared to other TV shows, but they're a little bit more reined in compared to like fucking Ideon is nuts. Like Ideon like really goes for it. It's got such a huge cast of characters. It's jumping around between everything in such an intense way. It's got such a sort of like eye for its central themes and central ideas that it's just plucking away at very diligently. And it's just got a different vibe than his Gundam stuff until you get to G-Reco, which is by far his most alienating Gundam show, because I think he is doing a non-Gundam Tomino kind of thing with it. And this is the first show where you see Tomino have this sort of like non-Gundam style that he has kind of ascended to this other level. Because I was curious to watch with Zambot and Daitarn if those shows had that, and they don't. And this is definitely the show where you see okay, this is what non-Gundam Tomino is like. I'm curious to see with, like, when we get to Ore Battler Dunbine and Elgheim, if those are like that also, or if there's a different thread of Tomino's style that we have yet to see. But it is really fascinating going back for me and rewatching Ideon after I've seen Brain Powered in King Gainer, being like, yes, this is all, there's this other thread of Tomino's career that he develops here that does ultimately, I think, arrive at G-Reco.
And if that all sounds weird to you, maybe if you're listening to this and you haven't watched Ideon yet, but you've seen all the Gundams, and you're like, well, how could something be more out there than, like, you know, Zeta or Victory Gundam? I mean, that's where Kill 'Em All Tomino comes from, right? Oh, my sweet summer child, you have no idea. Those shows, oh my god, they're peaceful compared to this one.
Yes, and we haven't even watched the movie yet. You know, there's still more to go for next week. But I've got a pretty mammoth notes document. So let's go ahead and get into the history, because there's a lot going on with Space Runaway Ideon. A lot of my history notes here are, again, they're assembled from the two books I imported from Japan. The museum book, The World of Tomino Yoshiyuki, from the museum exhibit in 2019, and my On Tomino Yoshiyuki book by the anime critic Fujitsu Ryota. So that's where a lot of these notes are pulled from. And then there's a couple of other things I grabbed from online. But these books have proved to be very handy, because researching some of these older shows can be pretty hard. So I'm very glad I got those. Anyway, so our history section here starts in 1979, because airing alongside the original Mobile Suit Gundam, Sunrise also had another show that was called Space Adventure Team Tanzer 5. That show was sponsored by the toy company Tomy, now known as Takara Tomy. And as that series finished its production, Sunrise began conceptualizing a new show with Tomy, which would eventually become Space Runaway Ideon. The initial concept for Ideon revolved around the unique gimmicks for the merchandise, right? So we were still very much in this era where they kind of come up with the toys first. So they brought in Higuchi Yuichi from the anime design company Submarine, which he had subcontracted on Tanzer 5, did a lot of the designs for that show, and they had him design the main mecha with the eye of, this is going to be the toy that is the thing that is like the whole show hinges around. The concept for the toy was to have 3 separate mecha that each could also transform between a ground form and a flight form. The ground form for each of them is a tank, a semi-truck, and a bus. Because that's what it is, and that's still what it is in the final show. Further, those mecha not only would each individually be able to transform between 2 forms, but they could also combine into a single giant robot. And so that the blend of those 2 elements, the transforming individual toys, which is what they had done on Tanzer 5, which is not a robot show, it's like a squad of people with transforming vehicles, but then also now they can turn into a big robot. Surely this could not possibly go wrong. So in order to accommodate those requests, the design ended up being very bulky and rectangular in order to incorporate all the different hinges and other mechanisms that needed internally to make the design work practically. Again, keep in mind we're in 1979, early 1980. We do not have like the crazy toy technology we have today. If you're wondering why does the Ideon have these gigantic big boxed shoulders, it is because they need a space for all the fucking hinges and all that shit to fit into the design. So taking on all of those demands and the kind of like very intense charge of designing this crazy thing, Higuchi designed the initial version of what would eventually become the thing we all love and know as the legendary giant Ideon. Higuchi developed a basic backstory for the machine targeted for elementary school kids. After meeting with the producer at Sunrise and the head of Tomy, Higuchi met Tomino for the first time, and Tomino asked him a delightful question, which is it okay if I change the backstory a bit? Which is a bit of an understatement of a question. Tomino was brought on to be director for the project in October 1979, when Gundam was still in production. This would have been when the Jaburo episodes of Gundam were on TV. At this point, the decisions around the mecha in collaboration with Tomy were already made. They were set in stone, leaving Tomino stuck with the basic design of the mecha. Higuchi's basic backstory, right, was for elementary school kids, and then Tomino famously did not like this. So he hated the design of the Ideon. Later on, he commented with this great, very Tomino line where he said, "Who would possibly use such an awful design?" So to incorporate this design that he despised into the show, Tomino changed the backstory more than just a little bit. He totally recontextualized the entire thing as an ancient relic of unfathomable power left behind by an ancient alien civilization. Tomino also asked for modifications to the design to be made, most notably the faceplate, so the whole kind of head changed, and all the stuff with the faceplate lighting up was all an addition he made. And then also the idea that there are all these corridors running up and down the interior of the Ideon that Higuchi had to design. Those corridors became necessary because Tomino's other really big change to the robot was that he wanted it to be a big robot, a very, very big robot, ultimately arriving at a size of over 100 meters tall, making a just ridiculously gigantic fucking robot.
Well, and can we just pause here for a second on the robot design? Because outside of the context of Ideon, it's a fucking terrible design. It looks stupid, and it works because of the story Tomino tells with it, and because he kind of leans in and weaponizes what makes it look weird to make it look scary and striking later on. But also, I actually think that thing of having corridors in it is so key because the Ideon is not a mecha in the way the mecha in the other shows are. It's a battleship. Like, this is we're going to talk more about the connections to Star Trek, but the scenes where they are battling in the Ideon are so much more similar to, like, Captain Kirk giving orders on the bridge of the Enterprise and then cutting to, like, Scotty in engineering. I'm giving her all she's got! And that's what Kasha is usually doing, right? Like, it is so much more of a team battleship thing than it is an actual, like, fighting mecha. And I do love that, like, the design being kind of awkward and gangly gave Tomino license to just go nuts with it.
Yes, and I do think that is the thing that once you're defamiliarized from the design by it being this, like, giant battleship thing that just happens to be shaped like a giant. And also, I think just the thing of getting the scale of it to be so huge and massive is the thing that makes the design ultimately land. Because yes, if you imagine the Ideon being the size of Zambot 3 or Daitarn 3, you know, like a Mazinger like style super robot size, it just would not really work. But making it fucking huge, making it feel like, okay, this is this like weird, bizarre thing that they have to kind of wrestle with to get it to work. And the whole dynamic is they've got like all these guys on fucking turrets and people manning the missile pods, you know, like there's just like the way that all functions in the show is so different. Yes, that is the stuff that makes the design work, because it is a very dumb, ridiculous, fucking awful design. And I do love Tomino's, just like him going up to Higuchi the designer being like, is it okay if I change the backstory just a little bit? And then coming up with the most elaborate, intense backstory anyone has ever made for one of these fucking shows. And then him just, you know, fucking with the design to the point of making it a giant 100-meter tall robot. It's very good.
It's so funny because, like, in America, you know, we have the conversation about, you know, can shows based on toys really be art? And what we're talking about there is like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the Transformers or something like that. They're like good shows, no doubt. They're fun, even if their obvious purpose is to be a commercial. But then you jump over to the world of Tomino Yoshiyuki and it's like, no. The question is, can toy designs be the bedrock for a avant-garde horror show about existential dread in the cosmos? Like, it's such a different level than we're used to having in like Western settings, and I think it's hilarious to me.
Yes, like I remember the ending of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon where all of them died in an explosion of like a karmic redemption and they entered the cycle of reincarnation or whatever. I thought it was fucking wild, you know, just to see the ghosts of Leonardo and Raphael and his brothers just floating through the cosmos.
When Splinter decides that Shredder and the Turtles just aren't getting along and he unleashes the Ide power, it's crazy.
Yep, yes, it is definitely, you know, Tomino it was an absolute fucking madman. I mean, he's always been a madman, but particularly at this time, he was off his fucking rocker in the best way. So, as with Gundam, Tomino became deeply engrossed in the planning of the series to like a pretty ridiculous degree, right? So, like, Gundam is the show that sort of popped that cap on him, and now he's like this madman who goes away in like you know, I imagine a cabin in the mountains or some shit, and just like that's full with like papers stuck on the walls. Because that's, if you look at some of the documents, that's what it almost seems like, where he's drawing fucking space colonies and the Lagrange points, and he's like, this is how fucking faster than light space travel works, and all this shit. In early 1980, he created a vast array of documents for what was at that point titled Space Runaway Gundam, which was the original name for the robot. The initial notes for this show are called liner notes, is how they're referred to as by the fans, and it's just like the original version of it is a huge assemblage of 120 pages of rough notes, memos, ideas, and designs. This is very scattershot, big, crazy thing. These notes were gradually condensed and refined and revised by Tomino over time until he used them to ultimately create what is the 10-page project document that's kind of like the pitch document for the show, ultimately titled Densetsu Kyojin, or Legendary Giant Ideon, and that project document was completed in February of 1980, which is 1 month after Gundam finished airing. I have translated the beginning of that document as I've done for the other shows, and so the beginning of that project document goes like this, and I even went so far, for the benefit of our notes, Jonathan, going into Google Slides and making the weird little charts that Tomino drew, because I wanted you to see his dumb charts.
Thank you so much. I love these dumb charts.
All right, so this project document kind of opener is broken up to a couple of chunks. The first one is on the production. He says, for this project, the targeted demographic is middle teens. It's like, okay, sure. You know, at least he's being honest that he's raising it up a little bit. Even middle teens is a bit young for fucking Space Runaway Ideon. And beyond the regular entertainment for a robot show, we will incorporate the compelling elements of a drama. He then included a chart where the top layer of the chart is a box that says average robot show, which leads to first-person drama. The bottom layer of the chart is Yamato/Gundam style military show. So he's kind of saying, here's this like new version of mecha shows. That leads to drama amongst the crew. So rather than just drama of the protagonist, it's the whole crew. He's saying these two things will combine together into the combined drama, which is Ideon. So Ideon is meant to combine the first-person drama of the average robot show with the big drama amongst the crew of the Yamato Gundam style show. He then says, real robot action, which uses the human drama of the sensation of various characters living as a foundation. The new world of Ideon will surely be the birth of such a new kind of robot show. He then includes the best chart, which is a 2-line chart. The first line has a box that says average robot show, that leads to robot action, and that leads to the excitement of the action. But then he has the second layer, which is a box that says Space Runaway Ideon. When Space Runaway Ideon leads to robot action, that leads to a box that says the excitement of action and drama, which is such a, like, I'm explaining it to a 5-year-old when I'm trying to do this, like, see, normal robot shows, they just have action, but the action is just because it's fun. For us, we have the action, but that's because it leads to action and drama. Which is true about Ideon. I think it is one of the things that is true about Ideon, but it's such a funny way to try to explain it to someone with this box chart.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yes. So then he continues after his charts. He goes, once again, we will boldly incorporate directorial methods which will grant a sense of real life to the science fiction and action world. That means we will take seriously the real sensation that each individual character is truly living. They don't simply operate based on a sense of duty or orders. Instead, each individual person, when granted a lifestyle and set of values, will create a more vivid, dramatic world. Also, the treatment of the central theme of Ide is designed to extend beyond the simple box of a, quote, battle show or a robot show. This will make possible the expansion of a whole new concept in the world of robot anime. But the main thrust of his pitch here, what he's trying to say, is this concept, which I think is what makes Ideon very different and very Tomino, is the way that he's trying to depict the characters as wholly unique individuals that have their own set of values, their own priorities that they operate on, and that we're looking at them from almost an objective point of view, rather than being kind of puppets for the storyteller to move the plot along and have the plot extend, which is a thing that I think Tomino does in Mobile Suit Gundam as well. It's a fundamental part of his writing style. It's like the distinctive thing of the psychological realism of Tomino's approach to characters. But this is where he's really trying to pin that as this is what the show is going to do that makes it different. I think it's interesting that that is his fundamental pitch, is looking at this notion of we will give each character their own lifestyle, their own set of values. They will operate based on those principles, not based on the generic principles of the drama or the plot. And that is the thing that will make this feel real and vivid and will allow the themes to be explored, which is all, I think, absolutely true about the end product.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can also, because it's interesting because in some ways he's pitching this as a continuation or break from Gundam, but I also think this is him trying to put into words what he had done on Gundam and where he wanted to go next with it, right?
Yes. It's because Gundam absolutely does this exact thing, but this is him trying to sort of explain it in some ways, but also with Ideon he pushes it even further because you don't have an Amuro, right? Cosmo is our main protagonist ultimately of the cast, but he is not the main protagonist in the way that Amuro is. And so you have this more removed sensation of the characters that pushes this idea even further than Gundam did.
Yeah, this is a pure ensemble show. I don't even think Cosmo functions as protagonist through the first core of this show. That's Kerala and Bess. And I think he eventually grows into that sort of rough POV role, but this is not a show with a single protagonist. This is purely an ensemble show, and to a degree that's actually kind of shocking compared to what had come before from Tomino.
Absolutely. Anyways, the project document continues on with the section that says, "What is E-Day?" A question that will plague humanity till the end of our existence. He says, "It is the basis for the core theme. E-Day is not a simple energy. It is designed as a sort of energy that operates based on human will. Within the story, it will be expressed as an energy that possesses infinite power created by the sixth civilization, the progenitors of planet Solo. When aliens attempt to steal their power, the protagonists, who at first have no idea what E-Day is, will be chased and forced to fight." He then explains the setting of the story. He says, "The era is around the year 2300 AD, an era where humanity has begun to migrate and settle amongst the stars. The stage shall be the various types of colonized planets amongst the vastness of space."
Well, now this is another thing we should mention, is that every Gundam show, and some of his other works as well, are fairly contained to what we would call the Earth sphere, right? They are in our solar system, and rarely going past, the furthest they'll go is Jupiter, right? And even then in Tomino stuff, we never actually see Jupiter. It's hinted at, and then stuff like Crossbone Gundam gets there. Space Runaway Ideon is near Earth for 2 episodes. It is an interstellar cosmic show, and I don't know how much he does that in other series. And I know there's stuff like Dunbine that is a full isekai kind of thing. But for this, that was one thing that was kind of shocking to me, because this is a very different genre of sci-fi. This is more into the Star Trek interstellar voyage thing, whereas Gundam is so contained to a local solar system, and that alone is a real difference.
Yes, and I think this is the only show he does that's quite like that, because Heavy Metal Elgheim is in a Star Wars-like galaxy far, far away, are they humans, are they not humans, whatever kind of setting, as far as I know, based on Super Robot Wars Y. So yes, this is this kind of, it's very much this 60s, 70s Star Trek-ish, we are lost in space, that whole kind of idea. It's pulling from that era of science fiction very heavily. It's the only time Tomino really goes that hard into that. This is where I want to have a brief tangent on the title, because I went down a little bit of rabbit hole trying to figure this out, because it should be noted up front that Space Runaway Ideon isn't the title of the show, despite what the theme song might tell you multiple times in the chorus line. So let's break down what is the literal title of the show. So the original title for the series did have the phrase Space Runaway as the epithet. Epithet is what I'm using to refer to here, that kind of phrase before the main word. So the mobile suit of Mobile Suit Gundam, the invincible Superman of Invisible Superman Zambot 3, that's what I'm calling the epithet. And so it was written as Space Runaway in katakana, but that was how you would read the kanji Uchu Dashutsu, which literally means escape from space. So it was escape from space, but it's read as space, quote unquote, Space Runaway in English.
And that's more similar to how Mobile Suit Gundam is done, because Kido Senshi doesn't literally mean mobile suit, but it is clearly written in English, and it is well understood that the title is Mobile Suit Gundam, right?
Yes, and so in Tomino's novels or in Gundam manga, the word mobile suit is written often with the kanji Kido Senshi. And that's just like a thing you can do in Japanese and in other languages like that have a kanji-like system. So that was where Space Runaway originally came from when it was Space Runaway Gondoroa, which thank God he fucking changed the name of the robot. Because can you imagine everyone saying Gondoroa all the time? It would have been awful.
Because Ideon is like a word that it just rolls off the tongue in a way that has that kind of mystery to it, and Gondoroa does not. That sounds like a medieval battle thing. I don't know. It doesn't sound right.
Yes. So he changed the name of the mecha from Gondoroa to Ideon. At that point, it acquired a different epithet, which was Uchu Gattai, which would literally mean union or combination in space, which is a like pun basically, because it is both. Gattai is the word you'd use for what the mecha do when they combine into Ideon to make one bigger robot, but that is also how you would refer to the notion of the collective conscious entity that is the Ide, is that it's like, that has Gattai, it is combined. But it's a terrible epithet, like it would have been awful if he fucking changed it, thank God. And so that's when he changed that to what is the ultimate title for the show, which is Densetsu Kyojin Ideon. Densetsu Kyojin meaning legendary giant, but he does a little bit of wordplay with it because the word Kyojin, which means giant, is the character for big Kyo, or like colossal Kyo, and the character for human, which would be Jin or Nin. He changes that kanji for human to the kanji for god, which would be Shin, but you could pronounce it as Jin. And so it is more literally the legendary giant god or colossal god, something like that is what it would mean. And so he's doing a little bit of wordplay with the notion of this legendary quote-unquote giant.
Yet another way Hideaki Anno was influenced by this is all of the wordplay he does with the word Shin in the 2000s with all of like the Shin Godzilla and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very much that kind of thing. So despite the fact that at this point the phrase Space Runaway has been totally removed from the title, it remained as a sort of catchphrase for the show. So it is in the opening lyrics, obviously it's in the chorus. It is the ending sign-off where Kasha and some of the other voice actors go, Space Runaway! And it is featured multiple points in dialogue. It's the title of one of the episodes of the show. So this notion of Space Runaway is very deeply in the show, but it is not the title of the show. Interestingly, in the context where it does appear in the show as like a piece of dialogue or a title, it is no longer Uchu Dashutsu, meaning Space Runaway. It is Uchu Tobosha, which would literally mean space fugitive or space runaway. It's a much closer meaning to what in English you'd say Space Runaway is, which is a good change. But me looking into all this made me wonder, well, then at what point did it start being referred to as Space Runaway Ideon in the English community? Because to be clear, people in Japan don't call the show Space Runaway Ideon. They call the show either Ideon or Densetsu Kyojin Ideon. So interestingly, when you look into it, as far as I can tell, it was enshrined like years and years and years ago, probably like a decade plus ago in the English fan sub community. So you can go looking for fan subs from the 2000s that are called Space Runaway Ideon. The first official English language release of the show came in 2017 when it had its streaming release on High Dive, and then eventually had a Blu-ray release and all this stuff. And High Dive called the show Space Runaway Ideon. And as far as I know, that is the first time it was ever officially titled that on like an officially available platform. Presumably they did so just because the impression amongst the Western audience for the show had already been so ingrained that this thing is called Space Runaway Ideon that they just left it as that rather than calling it Legendary Giant Ideon or something else. And then they went so far as to then change the titles of the movies, which are The Ideon A Contact, The Ideon Be Invoked. They call them Space Runaway Ideon A Contact, Space Runaway Ideon Be Invoked, even though there's no epithet on those movies at all. So in the English community, it is thoroughly referred to as Space Runaway Ideon, even though that is not and has never been the title. At no point was it ever Space Runaway Ideon, because by the time it became Ideon, there was no Space Runaway, even though it is all over the show in the opening theme and all that kind of shit. So it is a very weird scenario. I don't know why Tomino kind of wanted to have his cake and eat it too. They both didn't want the show to be called Space Runaway Ideon. I think because he wanted that sort of mystical, kind of ominous quality to the title with Densetsu Kyojin Ideon gives it, where Space Runaway Ideon sounds more like its predecessor show, Space Science Adventure Team Tanzer 5. It feels like that exists in that kind of genre. Densetsu Kyojin is a little bit more mystical sounding. But I think he liked the sound of it so much, he wanted to sort of keep it in the theme song and everything. But it's very interesting to me.
It's fucking fascinating because until you pointed all this out, I just assumed this was a Kido Senshi Gundam scenario where, like, I knew in my head that Densetsu Kyojin meant legendary giant, but I just thought, okay, well, that's the Japanese title, and then it's Space Runaway Ideon, or like a Neon Genesis Evangelion, right? Where Shinseki Evangelion does not mean Neon Genesis Evangelion. Like, there's things like that we have. And I guess it's not. And I just had never... Because also, I just gotta say, Space Runaway Ideon is an all-time 10 out of 10 phenomenal title for a TV show, even though it apparently is a title that it was never actually given, and that blows my mind. But that also seems kind of in keeping with what this show is about in a weird way.
Yes. I mean, you can't blame the English fansub community for being like, the show must be called Space Runaway Ideon, because it's what the dude says at the end of the fucking theme song is Space Runaway Ideon. In the same way that they do that on all of these shows. All these shows have the chorus ends with them saying Kido Senshi Gundam or whatever. It is just Ideon is this really weird outlier where it has a totally different epithet in its theme song than the actual one for the title of the show. So anyways, that's my weird rabbit hole that I went down being like, what the fuck is going on with the title of this show? Anyways, back to the proper notes. So now that we're in the production, one thing that's interesting to note about this is that this show is a break from what we've been watching so far, because for Zambot 3, Daitarn 3, and Gundam, there's a lot of continuity between the main staff of those shows and the people working on it. Because most of them remained between projects, or there'd be like a couple of people at the top level would switch out, but in general it was the same kind of group of people. For Ideon, however, most of the staff were made up of the teams from Tanzer 5, and then also Cyborg 009, the original Cyborg 009, which that show had just recently finished. But one person that Tomino did bring onto the project, because he was very particularly wanted this person, was Kogawa Tomonori, who had done the enemies designs, most notably the design for Kotosu from Daitarn 3, because as we talked about with that podcast, Tomi referred to himself as falling head over heels in love with Kotosu. And so he brought on Kogawa, made him the character designer and animation director, the chief animation director for the show, saying, and I did a lot of work to try to figure out how to translate what he says, but basically I want Kogawa's feminine characters would be, I think, the way you read the line he says, he literally says, Kogawa no onna no bubun ga hoshi, which you could also literally translate, I want his lady parts. It depends on how you want to read that. But, he wants that, like, the thing that he got from Kotosu, he wanted in Ideon as well, which obviously we'll talk about with characters like Haradu. You can see the very clear continuity of the design work there. Kogawa had a huge influence on the overall look of the show, not just because he designed the characters, but he also designed a lot of the color work. And that's where the Buff Clan gets their very unique, almost kind of pastel coloring that is featured in the show, which is very distinctive. And that use of color comes about in part because of the very limited amount of colors they could use for cell animation at Sunrise at the time, which was only 92 colors. So he picked some of the more unusual colors for that kind of off-white for their uniform, the kind of pastel colors he uses for their hair that don't show up in other places in the show. And it's one of the things that makes the Buff Clan designs very distinctive. And they're like weird kind of light green eyes. Like all those colors are very interesting. And Kogawa was the one who designed that part of it.
And it's such a strong aesthetic, and you can very much see where that comes from Daitarn, and like, it's such a cool contrast also to what we get from Yoshikazu in Gundam, and I think is really fun back to back to see those styles, because it also makes Ideon feel like its own thing right off the bat, even when, like, at the very beginning the narrative is similar to Gundam, but the look is so distinct, you can kind of accept it as its own thing as it grows into something else.
Yes, absolutely. And here's something I was very interested to learn. So there's one new area of the production that Tomino became involved in the first time for this show, which is he contributed to the designs of many of the mecha. So for the Buff Clan's Jukido mecha, or heavy mobile mecha is what that literally translates to, he designed many of them. With those designs basically being rough designs, but keep in mind that, Tomino is an artist, right? Not only for like the storyboards and stuff, but his background when he was a kid is he did lots of paintings and stuff like that. So he is like a very talented artist in his own right. And so he did a lot of those designs. Koga would then generally take a lot of those designs and refine them even more. In designing them, Tomino focused on creating a distinctive silhouette that communicated the mechanical function of the design. One of his policies was that the Buff Clan's mechs would feel like an extension of the mobile armors from Gundam, which I think you can see quite clearly in their designs. There's a lot of continuity from those mobile armor designs at the end of Mobile Suit Gundam to the weird designs that the Buff Clan have in this. On his process, Tomino commented, quote, "Based on the fundamental assumption that they could be made into real models, I felt that I couldn't complete the design if my imagination couldn't draw out how it would mechanically function, expressing it undeniably through silhouette from head to toe. He also commented in the design docs for the Buff Clan mechs, quote, since today's fans have the physical material of a model, they can actually hold it in their hands and compare just how different the designs are between ones made to be real and ones imagined only as drawings. I want to express that this is a new way of approaching things from the perspective of building the world for our show. So I thought this was fascinating that, like, very clearly on his mind was the notion that because the plastic model market was becoming a big thing, that the whole new kind of generation of fans, a new style of fan that was coming into being with Gundam and this kind of stuff that were interested in these models, that they would look at the designs in different ways and mean that you couldn't, like, you can't fake the design. It's got to be a thing that practically functions. It has to be something that can stand on its own, for example, and that's part of, like, the philosophy in designing these things. I thought that was very, very fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I don't think you see that idea come to full fruition in Ideon, because, like, I think a lot of the designs are good. There's also a lot of, like, kind of awkward throw-off designs that kind of feel like something from Zambot or Daitarn, which is fine for what this is. But I do think you see the I do not think this show has the, like, quality of designs that Gundam had in terms of the, like, what Okawara contributed to that show. But I do think the kind of depth of how many there are and some of those, like, fiddly little details you're talking about, if you think of this as the next show on the path that eventually brings us to, like, Zeta Gundam, and then you think of, like, everything there, and, like, how Gundam later on will start having quite a few credited mecha designers to kind of get all of those details down, and how central that will be to Gundam's entire existence through stuff like Gunpla, which is just hitting the market as he's talking about this.
Yes.
I think you see where that's going over time.
Yes, this is him thinking about it in the moment of looking at the changing, like, landscape of this kind of genre and the merchandise and all that, being like, this is where we have to go with it, like, right? Because that note in the design docs is him trying to express this to his team and stuff. It's like, this is our new way of approaching things. This is how we have to think of it when we design these. But I do love I think you're right that, like, it's not all the Buff Clan mecha designs work. And to be clear, Tomino, there's, like, a whole group of people that did them. Some of them are those people from the submarine kind of design company, including Higachi. Some of them are Kozawa himself. Some of them are Tomino. But I do like the approach that Tomino makes as the director, saying, like, let's make the Buff Clan mechs fucking weird. Like, they don't make mechs that are big bipedal robots. That's not how they think of things. There's an early episode where one of the Buff Clan soldiers looks at the Ideon and he's, like, shocked at the notion that it's a giant human figure. And that's one of the things that lends the Ideon its kind of, like, mystic power, is it is this giant humanoid creature. It is a colossal giant. It's not this sort of mechanized apparatus in the way that all the Buff Clan ones are, like the tripods from War of the Worlds. I think it's a clear design reference for what he's going for there, but they're very mechanical, they're very robotic, they are not androids or something like that in the way that the mobile suits in Gundam are, or all these robots for all these fucking things are. And that's where that mobile armor thing is. It's like they're totally defamiliarized from the human form, they're taken out of the uncanny valley. That's not any of that stuff. And so him doing that then means that the Ideon, being the sole humanoid mechanical figure, I think really in that contrast lends so much more weight to what the Ideon is in the show than if I think other directors would just say, well, the Buff Clan are going to have their own, the evil version of the Ideon, and they're going to build one of those. And the Buff Clan never has something like that. And I think that's like a really strong directorial choice to lean so hard in this other direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was that part of the design for the mecha. Let's talk about the design for the story. So in creating the story, Tomino approached Ideon fairly differently than he had with Gundam. Just as a recap of what we talked about last week with how he did the story for Gundam, Tomino for that show created a broad outline of blocks of episodes, and then created a detailed story treatment for just the first 5 episodes. And then from that point, he worked with the writers to create the stories for episodes 6 to 21. At that point, he had intended for that to be how the rest of the show would be made. He ultimately reverted back to doing those detailed story treatments from episode 21 on, because his vision for the show changed when he had his like new type thing kind of shifted his overall vision for the show. For Ideon, what Tomino did was, for the original project document, he created outlines for the first 13 episodes. which that was by January of 1980 is when he would have created those outlines. Then from February to September 1980, for most of 1980, Tomino, when continuing to work on the design for the show, created the outlines for the stories for all of the remaining episodes. The only episodes in the show that are not created from those outlines are episode 22, which is the recap episode, and then episode 31, which is the one where Bess confronts his parents on Earth and he gets kidnapped with Cosmo and all that stuff. As production began, the writing team worked with Tomino to take those outlines and craft them into full stories. In particular, if you look at the outlines for the stories, they don't generally include the details about the battles for that episode unless the battle is really important, like the ones where characters die or something like that. Instead, his outlines really are about whatever the main human drama is going on in the solo ship and stuff like that. So one clear example that I have, because it's in the Fujitsu Noto book, kind of breaks this down, is the outline for episode 13, which is one of the best episodes of the show. This is the one where Bandolota tries to assassinate Karada. And that outline only talks about that plot line. It talks about the Bandolota stuff, it talks about the Karada stuff, and other characters that enter the kind of gravity of that storyline. Now, to be clear, these outlines were changed, obviously, by the time they're made into full scripts. That one, for instance, has a very huge change where the ending of that episode, which is where Bandolota shoots the gun at Karada, misses, and fires all the bullets and keeps pulling the trigger. The original ending of the outline was that Cosmo would have interrupted that and stopped Banda from firing the first shot, and then Tomino and the writer came up with, well, it would be better for her to actually commit to doing it, and that heightens the drama. So when we say these outlines, I want to make it clear that it's not like every detail of that storyline was there and unchanged, but it's the general thrust of what that plotline was. But that outline does not address at all the other half of that episode, which is where Cosmo and everyone have to launch in the Ideon and they fight the Buff Clan and all of that. So that's kind of how the story was written. It was conceived as that human drama piece that Tomino was very fixated on. If the Ideon combat became important to that drama, it would appear in some of those outlines. But generally speaking, there's kind of those splits, which is why I think when we get to some of like the criticism of the show, I think it's where some of the first half of the show where those two elements don't always intersect particularly well. I think there's a flaw to this approach that causes that. But in the back half of the show where those things marry really clearly, I think you can see how Tomino's overall vision for the show is much more clear. He's got a much firmer hand on the overall narrative direction in a way that he had not had on any previous shows, including Mobile Suit Gundam.
Yes, and you also see, you can draw a line from here to how when we get to like at the very end, G-Reco, he just wrote, storyboarded, did everything on all 26 episodes. Like, yes. He's heading towards that idea of having this, like, authorial control kind of top to bottom. And he's not there yet. And obviously on some 50-episode shows, you're just never quite going to do that. And there's plenty of other important, writers and storyboarders who will continue to work on all of this. But you see that instinct coming out here.
Absolutely. The other major element that Tomino had to wrestle with when creating the story for Ideon was the Ide itself. And we'll get into some of this in more detail. I've translated some stuff I haven't put into these notes that I saved for next week when we actually watch the movie and get some more stuff revealed. But there's a whole very interesting document where he is like brainstorming about the Ide. Anyway, so similar to new types from Gundam, Tomino struggled with developing the concept for Ide, because obviously it's this weird metaphysical thing, and he struggled even more with trying to convey it to the writers. One writer for the show, Watanabe Yuji, commented, quote, "In the series' second half, I joked to Tomino that we had finally turned it around, but I think that that's just when Tomino saw where Ideon was going. I believe that when Tomino developed his, quote, Ide theory was probably around that time. This is likely referring to fall of 1980 as he finished the story treatments and production began. If he had it from the beginning and told it to us, we, the writing team, could have done things differently. But once we knew it, things became relatively easier, and I think the show became more interesting. It's just ironic that we were canceled partway through anyways." So very similar to some of the people that worked on Gundam talking about new types. I think in his head, and next week I'll have a whole thing where he's brainstorming the Ide. I think you see that he's got a very clear vision for it, but I think he had a hard time trying to communicate what the fuck this thing is to the other people working on the show, and that it's only the second half when it starts really entering the text of the show that the other writers, it kind of clicked for them. But I like this of like, I wish he had really told it to us early on, because we probably could have done a better job on the show for our part if we had known what the fuck that shit was.
Well, and the whole way the Ide is conceived here is so clearly not just an extension of new types, but a preview of where, when Tomino comes back to Gundam, how he will approach the new type stuff is so much more similar to this. Like, this show has about 5 different episodes that are just such clear blueprints for Char's counterattack, where, like, it's a big thing falling and everybody's collective will does something. Like, it is so like, I think you can put Ide in the same bucket as the general new type thing. Like, it is all of a piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So, indeed, the show, as the writer commented there, was canceled early. An experience at this point Tomino was quite familiar with. The show began airing May 8th, 1980. Ideon was originally scheduled for 43 episodes. I couldn't find any reason for why it was specifically 43. I assumed there was something in the scheduling for Sunrise's shows or that production block that's like, we'll do it 43. And that is what Tomino wrote his original story treatment for, was all 43 episodes. However, ratings for the show were poor, and the Ideon merchandise struggled to sell, especially the toys aimed at young kids, made by Tomy, which again was the main sponsor for the show. In an interview much later, designer Higuchi commented, quote, "For Tomy's toys, they had a gimmick called Miracle Sound, where you would press a light-up button on its chest and it would play a noise. No matter how you slice it, that's a gimmick designed for 5-year-olds. And I think it's a bit much to ask 5-year-olds to watch that show." In that sense, if we knew that was the target from the beginning, I later thought, couldn't we have lined this up a bit better? But getting the sponsor to pay out the money and then create a story that targets an older demographic was director Tomino's strategy, wasn't it?
Which I got his number, huh? Yeah.
Yes. I do. Like, this quote I got from a later interview with Higuchi that was like from the 2000s, and he's like so like out of it, like he doesn't fucking care. I just love this guy. Is like, oh, these fucking, they fucked this whole thing up, this whole thing with the stupid toys. It was all bullshit, because this dude also had to like bend over backwards to include all this horse shit in that toy that ultimately did not sell for the fucking show, and it's very funny. And he is right that this is Tomino's strategy. It was to get sponsors to pay out money and then him say, fuck that, I'm going to just make a show for a different target audience anyways. And so this is all clearly an echo of exactly what happened with Gundam, there with the company Clover instead. Luckily, Tomy, is still around. They didn't go bankrupt the way that Clover did. But Tomy's toys, the ones that started off the whole project, were not successful. And so the show ultimately had its final 4 episodes canceled. Episode 39, which ultimately became the finale on January 30th, 1981. That episode is nearly unaltered from its original script, but Tomino changed the last 2 minutes of that episode to create an ending point. Notably, he does this by getting rid of the ending theme credits section. So the ending theme plays, but there are no credits, and he just uses up that end piece there to jam an ending at the end of episode 39, which we'll talk about when we get there. But that's how he did it. There is no like, they argue for, can we get one more extra episode just to wrap it up with Gundam or something like that? It's like, no, you're done. Fuck it. Take that script. Here's like, kind of like, not to spoil too much of the movie, but there's like a Cliff Notes-ish version of, can I condense some of the ideas of the very end of the show in like 5 sentences? I don't know. Here we go. And there will be a lot more expanding on everything that happens in episode 39 at the ending in the actual movie, which does all those episodes. But that's sort of the situation of how you arrive at the end there.
Yeah, it's wild. It's because, like, when I say, like, at the beginning of this episode, Sean, that this show feels like I am still unfinished with it, it's because you get to, like, episode 38, and it's like, okay, we're clearly heading towards the ending, but it's obvious the ending isn't in the next episode. Like, you just feel like this does feel like episode 38, episode 39 of 43. The same way if, like, honestly, episode 39 of Ideon, which is the finale of the show, feels like if a cosmic glow from Gundam had to be the ending of Gundam. Like, yes. That's the kind of episode it is. That's where it's like, great episode, clearly we're near the climax, but this isn't it yet. And then, like, if at the end it was like, and Amuro saved the world, and, whatever, you had added in.
No, I mean, I love that example, because you're totally right, Jonathan. I can actually see it in my mind's eye, because that episode ends with Giran activating the solar ray and killing his father in General Revel, and it has that great scene where Amuro runs onto the bridge of the White Base and screams, "Don't move forward! It's the light of hatred." And I could just imagine then you've got Shiozawa Kaneto come on as a narrator and be like, "And that's when it happened. That's when the solar ray wiped out all of humanity, and it exploded and killed all the Zeons too." And the show just Amuro Furibuka Naide, as you just get these kind of like suggestive images of everyone, their spirits floating through space. That is almost exactly like what this would be if this was on Gundam. You're very right.
Yeah.
All right. But, however, While it was canceled, as with Gundam before it, Ideon did, of course, find a very passionate fan base amongst the growing otaku movement. Now, let's keep in mind that this is still pre-Gundam movies, so we have not yet entered the new era of anime, the Neon Genesis of anime, however you want to talk about that declaration. None of that has happened yet. Ideon, and its especially for the time radical approach to theme in the TV anime, inspired many, many young viewers at the time who become influential figures in the industry. Just a few of them here. Anno Hideaki, I think this goes without saying, that he has consistently cited Ideon as one of his favorite anime and biggest inspirations. We will talk about that with this episode. We'll talk about it more next episode with the movie. End of Evangelion does not exist without Ideon being invoked. This is just how it will be. He even did an interview that I could not find anybody reproduce online, which makes me mad because I want to find it. I'll still try to find it for next week's episode. But he did an interview for the 2013 Blu-ray release in Japan. That's on the booklet for that one. Another person who cited Ideon heavily as an inspiration is Ikuhara Kunihiko. He's the Sailor Moon and Revolutionary Girl Utena director, and particularly in Utena, you can see this influence very heavily. Hosoda Mamoru has cited this as one of his favorite shows. In fact, he did a series of interviews with Tomino for the HD restoration of Ideon when that was broadcast on the cable channel Wow Wow in Japan in the late 2000s. And then also Shinbo Akiyuki, the main director for Shaft on projects like the Monogatari series and Madoka Magica. Madoka Magica in particular, there's a lot of Ideon in that. He has also cited this as one of his favorite shows and a big influence. And basically, when you look at the list, I think it's fair to say that if you were a Japanese person born in the 1960s that eventually became an anime director, Ideon was a life-changing experience for you. Because if you were born in the 1960s, you were either a young adult, like 20, Anno was 20 when Ideon aired, or you were in your teens, like Shinbo, Hosoda, Ikuhara were all in high school at that point. This just sort of like changed your framework for what anime could do. And I think that there's a reason for that.
It's so funny to me that, so we've been producing this season of the show while I've been teaching this class on Hayao Miyazaki and Takahata Isao. And even though in neither of these projects we are talking about any works by Anno Hideaki, I have been talking about him nonstop because he comes up so much through all of the influences from the Tomino stuff, and then he comes up a ton in kind of the story of the foundation of Studio Ghibli through either direct intersections like him working on Nausicaa or things that Miyazaki and Takahata did that influenced him. And it's made me actually want to, when we're done with all of this stuff, go back and revisit a bunch of Anno work, because now I've had this like front row seat to all the kind of gestalt that made him, other than like I also need to go watch, I guess, some like Ultra 7 and stuff. And then I would have all of it in front of me, you know?
Yeah, you need to watch the Akioji Soji episodes of Ultraman. If you want to just watch some episodes of Ultraman to be like, what is the Ultraman shit that birthed Anno Hideaki? It's all the Akioji Soji directed ones.
Yes.
But yeah, it is, Anno, obviously, one of the seminal figures in the industry, and it's just, he's everything arrives at Anno somehow when you talk about anime. He's just, whether it's as a director or as like the biggest fan of anime that has ever existed in the history of the medium, it all comes to him somehow.
It absolutely does. And like, Gundam was clearly, super influential to Anno in all these ways, but I think Gundam was more influential for kind of like the kind of show it allowed to exist and the kind of fandom. Ideon is more influential formally and narratively, like very clearly. Like what it is as a story, what it is in terms of its style and aesthetic and all of that. The line between that and Eva is much clearer than like the Gundam TV show from 1979 and Eva. And especially I think when you get into like his like true kaiju stuff of the 2000s, like there's a lot of Ideon in Shin Godzilla, I would say.
Yeah, and I do think that's important to like note like the difference of the kind of influence Ideon has had, which I think you're right, that it's that kind of formal narrative, thematic, and the way that those things are expressed. Whereas like a Gundam, has those elements too, but it is more about like Gundam births an entire subgenre. There are no shows that are like, there's no Ideon likes, you don't have a bunch of like Cosmo Yukis running around. You don't have a bunch of Harudus in all these other shows or Gijs, that are just like that with like the serial number scratched off. Instead, like when you look at this list of directors, Ideon is one of the main influences for fucking Revolutionary Girl Utena. It's one of the main influences for Neon Genesis Evangelion, for Madoka Magica, for the Bakemonogatari series. Like this is like a wide range of very weird shows. that are not mecha. None of those are mecha shows, other than Neon Genesis Evangelion, and obviously many others as well. This is not a complete list, but it's where you see the different kind of influences. Ideon is so much about the tone, the style, the way you express theme, the way you get at this sort of like subtle growing dread and horror. That is like birthed into the very concept of what the show is, which is true of Madoka Magica, and Utena is like a very distinct thing in both of those. And Neon Genesis Evangelion, like Ideon is the thing that, like, as far as I know, captures that style first in the world of anime.
Definitely, yeah.
And so that's one place where we see Ideon's success. One other interesting note is that Ideon would eventually find its footing in the world of merchandise as well, just not with the toys that the show was made to promote originally, but in the world of plastic model kits. Again, there are a lot of similarities between this and what happened with Gundam. The plastic model kits for Ideon were and still are, this company still has the rights, the company Aoshima. So if you want to buy Ideon toys, it comes from the company Aoshima even today, and which, much like Gunpla did for Gundam, created a product much more suitable for the older demographic of fan that the show actually attracted. And so it's those plastic model kits for which they made obviously the Ideon and the Solo Ship, but also a lot of the Buff Clan mecha and stuff like that, were eventually had plastic figures made for them. Even at the time, despite the poor ratings, Ideon was valued very highly within the anime community. And there's a quote from Sugiyama Taku, who has come up on this podcast multiple times before. It's the name I can't seem to escape. He's one of the lead animators and directors at Toei Doga back at the birth of anime and Mushi Production, and he is also the older brother to KyoAni co-founder Hata Yoko, where we talked about Sugiyama a lot in that episode. He commented in a magazine publication that was released at the time of Ideon's airing, while it was still coming out, that it had, quote, transcended the limitations of robot anime, which, if there's a vote of confidence you want in the world of anime, especially in 1980, it would be from Sugiyama Taku.
Kind of this weird, like, grandfather figure to the whole industry in a weird way, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it just does crack me up that I just keep on seeing his name pop up all over the place. I've gotten very good at reading the kanji for his name because I just keep on seeing it. So all of this support and the staff's intense desire to see their story through to its proper conclusion did ultimately lead to two movies being released in 1982. The Ideon, A Contact, which is the compilation movie of the TV series, and The Ideon Be Invoked, which adapts the originally planned ending from the cut final 4 episodes. But we will get all into that more on next week's episode.
Indeed, and I am champing at the bit to watch those episodes, I have to say, because I want to see more Ideon.
Yes, and I've never actually watched the compilation movie, because when I originally watched the show, I was like, I just want to roll off. I want to see what fucking happens at the end. So I'm actually very excited to watch the compilation movie, because it does compile elements of everything from episode 1 to 37. And then 38 is and 39 are kind of in a different form in Be Invoked. So there's a lot that movie has to do.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. So and obviously those movies come on the heels of the Gundam movies being successful,
yes.
Which makes sense that then Ideon would be able to, they'd be like, hey, we got another weird mecha show that didn't do well in its time. Shochiku, you want to make movies of these? And like, sure.
Yep.
There we go.
There you go. So the staff, we've basically talked about all these people anyways, but just to write it down, obviously the director for the show is Tomino Yoshiyuki. Once again, we have original story credit for Tomino and Yatate Hajime. Character design and animation director is, again, Kogawa Tomonori. We will be talking about him again when we get to Zabungle, which is after the movies, and then also Ore Battler Dunbine. So, he is one of those main character designers that Tomino works with through the 80s. Mechanical design, again, is Higuchi Yuichi at Submarine. If you look at the credits, it just says Submarine, and it took me a very long time to figure out who the fuck actually was that, because that's the name of a company, but Higuchi was the main designer. Again, he designed the Ideon, he designed the Solo Ship, and the Ideon gun. Those are the main designs that he did for the show. Then he contributed some of the designs for some of the Buff Clan mechs, along with other members of Submarine. I have another quote from that interview with him that I want to put here that didn't fit anywhere else in the notes. This is Higuchi talking about his interaction with Tomino in that interview. He said, quote, "He got mad at me a lot," laughs. "I remember that well. Other than that, he was really detailed. People like me just think, it's an anime, so just let the robot fly. But he would say something very particular about how, no, the rocket nozzles have to go right here. But in that era, there were creators other than Tomino who were also concerned about that sort of thing. When told all that, the reasoning for it, well, it seemed the proper way to go about things, so I didn't resist it. There were a lot of times I just sit and listen and go, oh, I see."
I love this guy is such a real one. You can just tell he's not a hack or anything. He just understands it from a much more like sane business perspective. And then you're in the room with this guy who is this like legendary overworking auteur, and you're just like, okay, yeah, that's great. Ide energy. Okay, we put with the nozzles there. I got you. I want a drama about this guy having to sit and listen to Tomino go on and on about all this. It's great.
Yeah, it's just the interview's so good. It's just that kind of interview where, this guy is in his old age. It's like, he's just looking back on all the shit he did. It's just like, yeah, no, man, it was fucking wild. Like, whatever, yeah, you just go on and on about these fucking rocket nozzles. I don't know. Anyways, we have art director is Nakamura Mitsuki. I believe that was the same guy on Gundam, right?
I believe it was Mobile Suit Gundam, and at the same time, he also did Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind just after this. And I mentioned that there just because it was significant, because Nausicaa is a movie that draws from mainly mecha shows for its main leads. And I do want to say, I mean, the art direction on Gundam is great. The art direction on Ideon is a step up in every direction. Like the backgrounds, the settings, particularly in the final sets of episodes, as you're getting into more kind of exotic locales, and you have all these like nebula, and you have all these like meteor showers and things. Like, I think the background work in this show is fucking second to none for this era. It's incredible.
I mean, really, when you look at the whole aesthetic of the show, it's just so gorgeous. Of all the things we've watched so far, Ideon is, I think, a huge step up in terms of production value, in terms of like expressing that aesthetic. And yes, in like the specific aesthetic of it, which is this gorgeous vision of interstellar travel and the way that like the desk drive with the sublight travel and all that kind of stuff, the way they visualize all that technology is so cool and so evocative. The use of color is so cool. And I do think that there is like 1980, 1981, 1982 is such an interesting era for anime because it's this transitionary period from this very distinctive 70s style of anime that we get in Zambot, Daitarn, Gundam are very 70s. And then, in a couple of years after that, in like 1984-ish, you start getting what I think is like the very clearly 80s design anime. When we get to Zeta Gundam, Zeta Gundam is such an 80s looking show. And I think shows around this time, like I'm thinking Space Runaway Ideon, Armored Trooper Bottoms is another one that's right around this time that has this kind of look where it's just like, it's got kind of a bit of both, like it kind of grabs the best elements of both of those eras. Like it's got the better overall production design, the kind of the efficiency of production that makes the show look overall much sort of like cleaner. And you don't have as much of a like, oh God, this episode just looks like absolute shit, which happens on all the 70s shows we've watched. As just the occasional episode, you're like, what the fuck happened to this thing? The Kukuru's Doan's Island in Gundam is the most clear example of this. There's no episode of Ideon that is like that. I'm not saying that goes away from all anime, but it becomes so much less common in the 80s where the production, like the methods of production become much more streamlined. So there you have so many more very experienced people who've been doing this stuff for a decade plus at that point that just sort of like helps smooth all that over, as well as then when you get to the 80s, you have all the bubble money that gets thrown into it as well. But you also have this sort of different kind of retro vibe from the 70s in some of the designs. You have that more 70s era science fiction sensibilities to the show, which is very different from the 80s approach to sci-fi. And so I just think that there's this really nice harmony by it being smack dab in the middle of those two eras that just makes Ideon a really, really gorgeous looking show that also is a very unique looking show that looks different from anything else.
Oh, totally. And I mean, obviously this show also benefits from the fact that unlike, Yoshikawa on Gundam, Kogawa, the animation director here, did not have pleurisy halfway through and have to drop out. This is an actual show that had a clear chief animation director from episode 1 to episode 39. And so, yes, Ideon, does it have moments and shots that are less good than other moments and shots? Of course, that's inevitable. But, it is a much more consistent production. It looks good all the way through. There's certain, bank shots and stuff you'll notice pop up. My favorite one being there's a specific shot of Bess on the bridge where he raises up into frame and starts giving orders that they use in almost every episode, and it's just reused without even redoing the lip movement. So it never syncs to what the actor is saying. And you'll notice things like that, but those are just basic tricks that there are versions of that in use in anime today, obviously. But other than that, this is a much more consistent production than Gundam, the TV version was. If your main memory of Gundam is the movies that were cleaned up, and you go back to the TV show, they're rougher, right? And this show is just a step, as you say, up in all of those directions.
Yeah, I mean, really, the original Mobile Suit Gundam TV anime, it's about every third episode or so, they just can't draw the Gundam right, you know? Like,
Yeah.
that show has a real hard time getting the Gundam to look correct in many episodes.
Yes.
And Ideon, I'm sure there are specific shots you could cherry pick, but you don't have an episode where you're like,
No.
what the fuck happened to the Ideon? Like, what happened to its head in this episode? You just don't have that here.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Some of the other people on the team, just to shout out the writing team. We have a team of 5 main writers here: Koga Arata, Yamaura Hiroyasu, Matsuzaki Kenichi, Sukihiro Tomita, and Watanabe Yuji, who was the guy from the quote earlier. So a pretty kind of tight writing team, obviously, again, working with Tomino from the storylines. For episode directors, you've got, again, a pretty tight team of episode directors here. Yatabe Katsuyoshi, Miura Masanori, Sekida Osamu, Sadamitsu Shinya, who's here for one episode of episode 5. He's one of the few people who's directed both episodes of Gundam and an episode of Ideon. Ishizaki Susumu and Takizawa Toshifumi. And one thing that I think is interesting here is that, generally speaking, for the episodes we've covered so far, you would have about this. You'd have like maybe 6 to 7 people who are episode directors that also were storyboarders, outside of the main director, Tomino himself. Here you've got a lot of, like, a set of people who came in and did just a couple of storyboards. So in addition to those above episode directors, some of the other storyboard artists are Yoshida Hiroshi, Kiichi Kazuhito, Yasumura Ryo, Fujiwara Ryoji, and Yasumura Shoichi. They all contributed storyboards as well. So you have a lot more people credited as storyboard here than you have had on any of the things we've talked about so far in our Tomino-THON. And if you're wondering, Tomino himself is credited for 14 episodes on storyboards. Now, that is still a very large number. It's nowhere near as insane as the 25 he did for Mobile Suit Gundam. But obviously, he is still doing the thing he did on Gundam, where he is still redoing large elements of storyboards from episodes. He's still rewriting scenes and scripts and stuff like that. I don't get the sense that it is as intense as some of that stuff got in Gundam, where he would basically just redo an entire script and an entire storyboard on some of those episodes. But he is still doing that on the show. He is still, very clearly his presence is there on episodes, whether he is technically the storyboard artist or technically the scriptwriter for the episode or not. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, and then the last major credit here is the composer, which is a very interesting one, which is Sugiyama Koichi. So if you are a fan of JRPGs, you would know the name Sugiyama Koichi as one of the triumvirate of creators for the Dragon Quest series, who until his death, he worked on every single Dragon Quest game. But at the point where this show was made, Dragon Quest was yet to be a thing. So this is not the Dragon Quest era Sugiyama. But if you look into his career, it's pretty fascinating. So he had already had a very storied career at this point, but not always as a composer. He worked for several years in radio, and then he went on as a TV director, directing variety shows at Fuji TV in the 1960s. And while working at Fuji TV, he started doing music for commercials, and over time, the pay he was getting for doing that music began to eclipse his Fuji TV salary, and he ultimately decided to leave Fuji TV and just do the music stuff. In 1978 is when he did his first anime soundtrack, which was for the original Gatchaman show, Science Ninja Team Gatchaman. And then after that, he did the music for Cyborg 009, which was a Sunrise show in 1979. And that is the project that directly led him to doing the music for Ideon. Then obviously after Ideon, he would eventually go on with Dragon Quest and all of that. I do want to note, when we're talking about Sugiyama, though, that there is one other part of him that is very famous. He's passed away now, but during his life, he was a notorious political activist for various far-right nationalist groups in Japan, various racist groups, and groups that denied Japan's war crimes in World War II, and that kind of the intense modern era Japanese nationalism. He was a big proponent of that. Again, no longer with us, but he made some amazing music, but was, by all accounts, also a dick.
Well, yeah, this is, people are tough. This is where it gets tough. Sugiyama is one of my favorite musicians of all time. He is. I think, his music it means a lot to me. I think his work on Dragon Quest is towering and stunning. I think the score for Ideon is phenomenal. I think it is probably the best score for a Tomino show so far, even including original Gundam. It is just tremendous. It goes in so many interesting directions. Sugiyama was an actual like classical composer who could like use an orchestra in such fascinating ways. You have such amazing vocal work in this show with some of the choral stuff. There's a piece in the last episode that sounds right out of The Shining, like very similar to the Wendy Carlos score for that movie. You have one of the main action pieces does the thing where you're bouncing the wood inside of the bow against the strings, and it's like really tense. Like, it is a tremendous score. He was an incredible musician, and he had horrible politics. And, what do you do with that? I don't know. That's one of the great questions of the human experience, right? And it sucks. I think it's worth saying, not in any way as an excuse. I've sometimes seen this said in like gaming circles that about Sugiyama, and it is sad but worthwhile to acknowledge that these awful views he had are more mainstream than we would like them to be in Japan. Like, this is very similar to like what Abe Shinzo, the long-serving prime minister, would say about all of these things, right? The newly elected, at the time of this recording, female prime minister Japan has now, has very similar noxious nationalist views. So it is sadly a very alive set of politics in Japan. I also think it's notable, like, Sugiyama is quite a bit older than a lot of the people working on anime at this time. He was born in 1931. The other two people on the Dragon Quest crew, Akira Toriyama and Yuji Horii, are born in the 50s. Tomino is born in the 40s. Like, Sugiyama just has this kind of, in his politics and everything, this old man, much more nationalist energy. Not to say that young people can't have that, obviously, but for this generation of anime, he was an outlier on a lot of that, and I think part of that is generational as well as political. But it is the tough thing talking about this guy, but... So, amazing music. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I totally agree. Like, I don't think there's any reason why someone having totally noxious politics means that they can't also be a very talented artist. Because, I mean, Sugiyama Koichi, just an incredible composer. His work on the show is phenomenal. And yeah, there are some tracks like that when you're talking about that kind of battle theme that has that very deep, stark string section that opens it up. That feels to me like it is a clear inspiration for Saigusa's style in the Zeta, Double Zeta, Char's Counterattack soundtracks. Yes. It's like a clear predecessor to the kind of thing that he's doing on those shows. But yes, like whether you're talking about the very kind of lyrical music, I don't mean lyrical there just in terms of singing, but in terms of the style of the melodies, is gorgeous. And that's where you feel that Dragon Quest energy, particularly the whole opening piece of the ending theme is just an overworld theme from the Dragon Quest franchise. I mean, you can feel that style there, but also he goes into other kind of genres and styles of music that aren't really in the Dragon Quest games, and are more that kind of the action themes and stuff go for a different approach. But it is a truly, truly phenomenal soundtrack. And with that phenomenal soundtrack, we have two very phenomenal songs, which is our opening theme, Fukatsu no Ideon, or the revival of Ideon, and the ending theme, Cosmos ni Kimito, To the Cosmos with You, both of them composed by Sugiyama. The opening theme is vocally performed by Taira Isao, who can belt Space Runaway Ideon like a motherfucker. And the ending theme is performed by Toda Keiko, who also is the voice actress who plays Karada. She was also a general musician as well. So she's not like singing in the style of in character as Karada or anything. She's just a very good singer.
This is before the era of character songs in anime, obviously. So yeah.
So it is not the thing where, like, if you're trying to find it on Apple Music or something, you have to look up the name of the character, and that's what's going to get you the song. If you're like looking at K-On! Or something, you have to do that.
Right.
This is just Toda Keiko singing. But for both of them, the lyrics are written by Tomino Yoshiyuki as a thing he started doing on Mobile Suit Gundam, and he will do for basically everything, as far as I know, that we will watch from here on, because the man likes writing the fucking lyrics for his shows.
And he's just getting better and better at it. Like, I think Fukatsu no Ideon it's a more complex, as you would expect from Sugiyama, a more complex like song and arrangement than the Gundam theme, and I love it. It is also, like the Gundam theme, just irrationally catchy, and just I've been walking around the house, singing Space Runaway Ideon, Ideon, making such great use of the fact that N is a separate syllable in the Japanese language, which is great, and I fucking love it. I have no idea how you would sing that if you had to translate that into English, because it would sound so weird if the rest of it was in English, but it's great. And then that ending theme is so good. that it's the only insert song they need. And they just use other verses of it for various pieces throughout the show where they need a sad insert song, and it's perfect. I think it has a very similar impact as like the songs in the movie versions of Gundam, of just like it hits with that kind of weight. And yeah, that's just a great song. And I think Tomino's lyrics only getting better and more complicated and more interesting.
Yes, I adore both these songs. For Katsuno Ideon, I just always get really hyped. The drum part that at the end of that song is so fucking good. Where it's like, and you're like, fuck yeah, it just really gets you hyped up for the show. It's really great. And I did go through, I want to read through the lyrics with you, Jonathan, because I went and did a translation of them, because I figured, hey, if we're doing a Tomino-THON and Tomino writes the lyrics for all of his shows, we got to talk about some of those lyrics, because particularly for this show, the lyrics are really good. Especially because for Fukatsu no Ideon, I think the music has a very kind of uplifting, positive energy to it, but the lyrics are not that. I think it's really interesting that if you're just kind of vibing with the song and you're not paying attention to the lyrics, you might not realize how like ominous they are. So I've gone through it. I've done my own original translations for them because I wanted to do something that wasn't just a literal translation, to try to capture what I think is some of the vibes of the lyrics. So I'm going to do a read through here. Let's start with Fukatsu no Ideon. We can talk about a little bit what this is, and I think this will help lead us into discussing the themes and stuff of the show. So this song goes, "Can you hear it? Surely you can hear it. That distant roar. Within the darkness, your heart stirs. The awakening begins. Its towering form splits the earth. Is it a testament to righteousness? The might of the legendary giant slices through the galaxy. Its roar signals a blow like lightning. Do not tremble. Fixate your eyes. It's the moment of resurrection. O humanity, O life, look upon the beginning. Space Runaway Ideon, Ideon." So far, that is what is covered in the opening theme. The full version then goes on. "Will you fight? Can you fight? You, trembling heart? Demonstrate your bravery to the evil power which now approaches. Its shining form bounds through space. Is it the cry of life? The power of the legendary giant slices through the galaxy. It's as though that which fires the ultimate blow is my own self. Do not tremble, heart of mine. Open up the moment of resurrection. O humanity, O life, witness the power. Space Runaway Ideon, Ideon."
It's so good. As you say, like, if Tomino was having trouble explaining what he wanted Ide to be to the writers, he clearly knew it somewhere inside him because it's in that song. It's all there. And I think the way... And this is so perfect with Sugiyama's music here and the way the song opens, that starting with, it almost sounds like a little folk song with that Kikoeru ka, kikoeru daro, harukana, todoroki, and like it gets heavy and then it goes in and this song goes so hard from this like kind of light opening. It's such a great kind of intro to what this show is going to be, and it gets you hyped as fuck every time.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, it's the line. I've translated it here because I didn't want to use the word justice because it just gets so killed when you use this for translating the word seigi all the time. But the line I've translated here is it a testament to righteousness, is the seigi no akashi ka. That line, it's so good because it's so suggestive of the show, because these songs always have this, where they have like the "I'm the symbol of justice" line or whatever, and turning it into a question is so good. It's so subtle, but it's like, if you did this in another song, it would be implied that the answer to that question is yes. The way it's used in these lyrics is like, I don't know. Is it? Like, is this, in the same way that the characters in the show are struggling with, is the Ideon something that is a positive force that operates on goodwill and those things like the legends from the Buff Clan, or is it something totally different? And all of that is embedded in the lyrics for the song, and it's fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's wild.
All right, and now let's look at the lyrics for the ending theme. This was much harder to translate because these lyrics are very poetic. I tried my best here. So this is Cosmos ni Kimito, or like Through the Cosmos with You is how you could translate that title. It goes, "Abandoned by our one and only planet, walking this endless journey with you. We had a sudden brush of shared affection, but we're only playing the fool, licking each other's wounds. Soaring through the cosmos, the stars, sending my prayers now to you. Soaring through the cosmos, the stars, I'm sending my prayers now to you. If we separated, it would surely be a relief, for you aren't needed in these abrading days. Then suddenly I think to give sympathy to your parched skin blasted by tears. Soaring through the cosmos, the stars, sending my prayers now to you. Soaring through the cosmos, the stars, I'm sending my prayers now to you. Even after death, we'll meet again in time. To keep on living will only bring you sorrow. We had a sudden brush with love that we try to bottle up merely as memories. Soaring through the cosmos, the stars, sending my prayers now to you. Soaring through the cosmos, the stars, I'm sending my prayers now to you.
It's so good. Each of those, because that first verse is what's in the show for the ending theme. And then verses 2 and 3 are used as insert songs at various points. And again, powerfully every time. And like, there's something about, if you're just watching the show and you don't know about those other verses yet, which is how I was watching it, I hadn't like grabbed the soundtrack yet to listen to those. And you hear those verses for the first time in the moments they've chosen to use them. Oh, it's a knockout, you know?
Yes. Yeah, it's very... The writing for the lyrics, it's just so gorgeous, particularly in Japanese. There's this recurring line that uses the word futo. That's the thing I had a hard time translating. That is like this sort of serendipity of the meeting of these people. But for me, the line, it's in the second verse that I think in Japanese is just so good. I tried to translate, which is Namida ga kareta kawaita hara ni, which is my to your parched skin blasted by tears. There's such a great oxymoron of this idea that your skin is dried or parched, but the thing that has done it is your tears. That's what it has caused it to be parched. It's such an evocative oxymoron. It's like the kind of thing that if I was trying to teach an oxymoron, this would be the thing. Is like, look how fucking cool this line is, and what it's suggesting about the nature of sadness and tears and all this. It's just so good.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Japanimation Station. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to like and subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tell your friends.
You can also find us over at the Purely Academic Podcast, our potentially educational variety show where we talk video games, movies, TV, and more every month. And you can read my movie reviews and follow everything we release together on the Fade to Lack Substack at www.jonathanlack.com.
And now, back to the show. All right, that leads us now into our overall discussion of the show, and how do you want to break this down? Because we've got our characters, we've got like the overall theme, like where do we want to go from here?
I mean, I guess we should just kind of go back to the beginning of this entire discussion and like the experience of watching Ideon and gradually realizing what the show is. Because, again, it starts out, I even noted in my notes, like, the first episode of Ideon is very similar to the premise of Gundam in terms of, like, where is, like, Cosmo situated? What is his father doing? It's related to the robots. The aliens arrive. The attack that kicks everything off is sort of accidental. It's like, as in Gundam, like, Char did not go there intending to start this, like, all-out attack, all of that stuff, right? It becomes kind of desperate. You have a lot of the adults die. You have this kind of ragtag crew that gets pulled together. It's kind of all of that, you know, your setup that you see from original Gundam and that you'll see in Gundam. It's a very, like, what am I looking for? Kind of standard setup for a mecha anime, right? That you get in not just Gundam, but a lot of Gundam, you know, inspired shows in the future as well. But it starts to get weird. It starts to get interesting very quickly. It's very clearly an ensemble show right away because Cosmo is there functionally in the early episodes as the guy kind of heading the Ideon crew, but he is not in any way the protagonist early on. Like, he is not moving the plot. He's not even really our POV. Karala, who is the woman who is from the Buff clan, but winds up stranded on the solo ship as their prisoner and then later their crewmate, is a main character. And I think Bess is your other one who is like the real mover and shaker of this world early on. You have a lot more time spent over with the enemy faction than you would, I think, normally get. And then, of course, there is the Ideon itself, which is a very different beast right away in terms of like how it operates in battles. But you don't realize at first that it is essentially like a Lovecraftian eldritch horror kind of thing until you get deeper and deeper into the show. And what the ultimate dynamic, and I think the final episodes really start crystallizing this because it is where the characters become fully cognizant of it and start giving voice to it, which is that these characters are trapped by this thing. This is not a war story about two factions strategically kind of outmaneuvering one another, where there is an ideology at play that must be defeated or, raised or something, in the way Gundam is. Gundam is a kind of classical naval fiction kind of thing where nobody in the story is perfect, but there is a clear right and wrong by the end of the day, in terms of like Zeon is bad. What they want the world to be is bad. Amuro and crew are fighting for something better. That is not the case in Ideon, in part because also, as the show goes along, this becomes much less of a Gundam-style thing than I think a return to ideas Tomino had in Triton of the Sea and in Zambot 3, and to a lesser extent Daitarn 3, which was his desire to take what starts out looking like clear-cut, heroism versus villainy and undercut it, and where that is done very awkwardly in Triton, fairly awkwardly in Zambot, and then really artfully in the ending of Daitarn 3, it is so much the animating core of this show, because you get the Zambot dynamic of our main crew does not have any home base. Everyone is rejecting them. And that's the whole idea in Zambot, is that the Gene family, everybody on that show, on Earth and the aliens, like they're being fought from both sides. And here you get that as the solo crew. You think they're going to be maybe White Base-esque, and that eventually the military will value them, and they don't. Earth doesn't want them. The Buff Clan doesn't want them. Everyone fears them. They eventually fear themselves. And then on top of that, you get this growing dynamic of them realizing that even if they want to extricate themselves from this situation, even if they want to go find an uninhabited planet and live alone, even if they want to give up the Ideon to someone else, they can't. There is some kind of web of fate. There's some kind of larger force that is trapping them on this ship, that is trapping them in that giant mecha, that is causing events to happen by which other factions are hating them and wanting to take them. And that there's this power that they have that they cannot control, that is greater than them, that could clearly wipe out all life, that cannot be defeated. The idea that the Ideon is going to go down in battle exits as a possibility like halfway through this show. It is not like, the Gundam ends, Mobile Suit Gundam blown up and destroyed. That is not something that is going to happen to the Ideon. It is not a live question. The axis of action stops turning on will they win the battle to what kind of collateral damage will happen because of how far their enemies or them push things in this battle. And so the question becomes more of is there any way to extract themselves from this cosmic horror they find themselves in? And it's this show that you eventually watch with this fucking pit in your stomach, because it is almost more akin to a haunted house story or something, in that there is a haunting spirit animating all of these things, and the characters are trying to figure out their role in this larger plane of existence. And I think watching the show take that turn, the amount of which you see Tomino's penchant for experimental wild imagery, which really goes overboard in the best way in the final episodes of this thing, but is there throughout, the amount of story that is told through kineticism in a way that feels like a clear extension of Gundam, but also a preview of future shows. It is such a dynamic watching experience, where this is a 39-episode show that does not feel like it is done evolving, changing, deepening, revealing parts of itself until literally the screen goes black at the end because they didn't have time for the end credits while they were explaining their last piece of narrative evolution.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great breakdown of a lot of what the show's doing here. And in particular for me on this rewatch, it really stood out to me how much this show is Tomino making good on the thing he wanted Zambot and Triton to do, especially Zambot, because that was more like from the beginning he was setting out to do this thing, rather than Triton. He was trying to be a weird rebel partway through and trying to figure that shit out. And the thing we talked about with Zambot was that notion of a lot of these ideas are good. The problem is how they are delivered, especially the whole ending of is humanity actually evil? And the idea that the enemy force, the kind of godlike entity at the end of that show presents, is so kind of ham-fisted and shoved in at the very ending that it doesn't carry any dramatic or narrative or intellectual weight for the viewer. It's just information that's presented to you. And Ideon is this like crazy Trojan horse show where he actually does it the right way, which is Ideon is a really massive slow burn of a show. To the point where like I do think there are stretches like around the midpoint or a bit before the midpoint where the show gets a bit overly repetitive. It gets a bit tedious. I think there are ways that could be tightened up of like, there's just a few too many times we're going out, we're fighting the Buff Clan and all that before the main characters start to catch on to the bigger nature of what they are a part of. Because as soon as that wheel starts turning, which is around the midpoint of the show, it's just like gangbusters all the way to the end. But you know, the only flaw, if there is a flaw there, it's one of that is necessary in order to play the trick it's trying to play. It needs to be the slow burn to get you used to the motions of a mecha show that Ideon is replicating for you until you realize that Ideon isn't actually a mecha show. And that's the thing you need to do in order for Tomino to play the magic trick he wants to play, which is to flip the audience's entire perspective of what's happening and the kind of moral compass of what's occurring here and the consequences of what's going on. And in order to do that, you do need to lull the audience into this false sense of security where you're like, okay, every episode, this is what happens. There's a new Buff Clan commander. They've got some new kind of mecha. You know, there's some kind of human drama on the solo ship. Sometimes the human drama is like hugely compelling, like the episode 13 one with Bandolota. Sometimes it's fine, but it's not like anything to write home about. And they launch and the Ideon fights and he wins the day and all that kind of stuff. And then slowly you're like, and you're kind of rooting for the main team and all of that. And then slowly you start to stop rooting for the main team all the time because slowly you start to see how like they are bringing destruction in their wake. It's not like Zambot 3 where everybody blames the Gene family, but the Gene family is not involved at all. Like there's no way that you could describe them as being morally culpable for what's occurring on Earth. They're actively trying to stop an invasion that they have no part of. It's a complete misunderstanding on the part of Earth people that just assume there's these other aliens, so they must be involved with it. With the moral compass of what's happening in this show, it's much more complicated because to what extent do the solo ship crew have the ability to make decisions on what happens? How culpable are they for the results of those decisions? And you see, you know, massive destruction and huge loss of life because they are dragging the Buff Clan through the universe with them. Sometimes because they're being tracked, sometimes because they are literally dragging the Buff Clan through them, like in the episode where Harudu is trying to escape and she can't because the power of the Ide is warping space-time to the extent that it drags her ship in with them. And like that sense of like that turn is so powerful and so potent because the slow burn has been so perfectly executed, where you've been brought so into the world of the show and its characters and the details of all of these things, and given all the right breadcrumbs to see that there is a larger thing going on here, to that when you start getting those little morsels around the midpoint of the show where the characters start saying it, you start leaning more and more into it. The Ideon starts doing the wildest fucking shit you have ever seen, like blowing up the goddamn rings of Saturn and shit like that. At that point, you're like begging for the characters to find some way to get out of this, and they can't. And all of those ideas are so powerful and so dramatically interesting. And is this true fruition of these ideas about inverting the nature of good and evil, causing the audience to question the assumptions they've been making about the show in a very fundamental way, these desires that Tomino had wanted in his early productions but could not figure out how to do, like Ideon does it fucking perfectly.
It does it, yeah. And I think, like, there are criticisms you can make of it that I think are separate from this. Like, I think in that first half, you do have just a little too much of the sheer number of, like, Buff Clan leaders who have to come through, get defeated, come back out. And it leads to, like, some narrative dead ends. My single biggest criticism with the show would be the character Damido, who is the one voiced by Ginga Banjo, who is, like... Mm-hmm. At the beginning, he is basically equal with Guijay as one of the main leaders on the Buff Clan side, and he almost seems like this show's Char Aznable, and that he's plotting against everybody else. And I think some of this is intentional in that he is kind of this show's Char, and then he gets unceremoniously jetted out of the show because that's not the kind of show this is. But I also think it's weird stuff like he gets jetted out, comes back for one episode, dies, and you're like, oh, I thought this guy was important, and he's not. And there's little, like, narrative dead ends like that, some of which I do think is part of the slow burn, like, and some of it is just part of like making a show this wild. I think you're inevitably going to get some weird like dead ends and things like that, because you again are kind of planting the seeds and playing the trick. But like in the end, do any of those criticisms matter in my overall assessment of the show? Not really, not at all, because like as you say, that arc that it is tracing and where it goes with it is so clear and so compelling. And once you start getting a sense of where it's going, and as the viewer, you naturally get a sense of it before the characters do, because we have a 30,000-foot view, and this is an ensemble show where we have a pretty omniscient view of the world in this show. This is not limited by anyone's POV, where, like, Gundam has a fairly omniscient view, but it is still pretty rooted in Amuro on the white base, and then over on the other side, it's rooted to various characters. Char at first, then Rambaral, then, whoever comes after that, right? And this is not that. This is a pretty fully omniscient third-person narration that we have. And you also just start to realize, like, who the characters are, that, like, there's something else I love about this show is that the solo ship crew are so fucking normal. And I don't know how else to say that. And it's like that word seems insufficient for it, but it's true. Like, Cosmo never reveals himself to be a new type or anything. He's pretty handy. He's really good with a throwing knife, He's physically capable. He's smart. He's good under pressure. But he's like at best, a pretty good soldier, right? And he's like a pretty nice dude. But that's who Cosmo Yuki is. Like, Best Jordan is not Captain Bright. He is not the guy who's going to go win 7 wars for you. He's a pretty good dude. He's good under pressure. He's good working with other people, but he's not a military command genius. Cheryl Formosa, which, the names on this show, we'll get to that later. She is, she is smart at looking into the archaeology stuff, but she doesn't turn out to be a genius who's able to uncover all these things. And I could go on. And they have a pretty normal relationship amongst them. Like, there's a little bit of White Base-esque command structure drama early on, where there's an episode where Cosmo and Kasha break the rules and get locked up. But for the most part, Best does not try to run this thing like a tight military operation, because he knows that's not what this is. And by the end, it's just a group of pretty regular people in absolutely extraordinary circumstances and moral quandaries. And there's something about that expands the level of empathy you have for them amidst these absolutely horrifying circumstances, in the same way that, like, the best horror movies and stories are not about extraordinary people with an ability to, like, work with this. They're about people you feel like you could be in that scenario, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's no question that the only reason any of these people live past episode 3 is because they've got the solo ship and the Ideon. It's not like when Amuro gets into the Gundam, obviously he still has a lot of growing he needs to do, but he immediately is so capable and so smart that he is the one who has to figure out all this shit. Whereas, like, Cosmo, I mean, he's smart, he's got a good head on his shoulders, but the Ideon is doing most of the work. And very important, like, if you go back and rewatch it, or we'll get the a contact, right? If you didn't know from the very beginning, Piper lose a relationship with the Ideon and the way that it responded to that stuff, Piper's in the Ideon cockpit in some of those early episodes, which is why it's as powerful. It's doing some of the stuff kind of on its own, but Cosmo doesn't really understand what's happening, and the audience is not given enough information at that point to know that, to be able to understand that the Ideon is acting of its own will, because nobody understands anything about how this fucking things work. They're just throwing levers and pressing buttons and shit, and stuff starts happening. But it's the Ideon and the solo ship are solving those problems for them early on, and they are kind of, their hands are at the controls, but they're not really doing anything.
Here is one of my absolute favorite threads in this show that is exemplary of this, is that early on, the Buff Clan plants what they call like a biological tracking device or something. This little tracker on the Ideon that can track it through hyperspace. And every episode I would take note in my notes of, because the show is very, like, attuned to this, because every Buff Clan leader will talk about the tracker, and then you will always have on the solo ship, Bess and everyone go like, how are they tracking us? And I would keep writing, like, count of episodes where they have talked about the tracker, but not gone and looked for it, right? And, like, no one is thinking of going and checking for the tracker. Or, like, you also have this thread that starts out kind of hackneyed, and I think it's clearly intentionally funny, of characters on the Ideon finding the tracker, going, wonder what this is, and then tossing it aside and not getting rid of it. And this continues all the way into the 30s stretch of like the episodes in the 30s when Gijay finally joins the crew and, having been one of the people tracking them, finally goes, hey, you guys have a tracker, let's disable this. And at that moment, I realized how kind of genius that thread is, because Gijay is the first person with any kind of military prowess who has joined the crew, and he's the guy to say, hey guys, check for trackers. And like, and at, at certain points in the show, I thought this was maybe kind of a hackneyed, like, convolution going on in the plot, but it is so clearly intentional to have this thread of showing, like, how just brutally overmatched the Solo crew are. It is just a group of normal people who are being buffeted by the whims of this crazy alien power that is guiding them, and that little tracker device is such a key thing in this development.
Yes, I mean, I'm glad you pulled out that detail, because that thing is the perfect example of the Trojan horse structure of the show. Because it is this thing where they have that tracker, and not only is it that, like, you periodically get the Buff Clan throw new trackers on the Solo ship just in case, like, you have multiple times where, like, oh, they're getting away, throw a tracker on it. And they've got multiple, and you have multiple moments in episodes where, as you say, people find them or like, oh, I don't know what the fuck this is. I mean, there's one specifically where I think Jolliver finds one, who he's like the tech head on the ship, so you're like, oh, maybe he will figure it out, and he's like, what is this thing? And then Bess yells at him, put it back. We don't know what anything is on this ship. It might be important. It's like when you move into a new place and there's like a switch on the wall and you flip the switch up and down and you don't see anything happen. And you're like, well, I'm just going to leave it as on because I don't know. If it's off, maybe I don't know what the switch is doing. But if I flipped it to off, maybe the fucking house will explode. I don't fucking know. So it's like, I don't know how any of this works. I don't know where this goes. Let's just fucking leave it as it is. And they have no idea anything what it is.
Because if this were Gundam, the plot would be for 2 or 3 episodes they're tracked, and then Captain Bright would go, everybody, stop what you're doing. Yes. We are scanning this ship for trackers, right? But that's also because Captain Bright is on a military vessel, and he knows it's new. He wasn't supposed to be the captain of it, but he does have an understanding of what these things are. But Bess Jordan doesn't have that. He doesn't have that luxury.
He's like a security guard, basically. Yeah. He's the chief of security of that planet. He's not a military commander of a vessel.
But it's also not a military vessel. It's an alien artifact. When he says we don't know what any of this stuff is, like the switch in your house, he has a good point, right?
Yes. No, absolutely. Like, fucking leave it there. Like, don't touch this shit. We don't know what any of it is. But then the genius part of the tracker thing is that, yes, they get Gijay on, and they have that episode where they get rid of all the trackers. But then you have multiple episodes where the Buff Clan keeps finding them anyways. And they don't give you exposition the first couple of times that happens.
Yes.
But it's like 2 or 3 times after the Buff Clan are tracking them anyways is when you get the reveal that the Buff Clan is tracking them because the Ideon wants them to be tracked. The Ideon is it's such a powerful force in the universe, it's creating a massive space-time distortion that the Buff Clan can follow, and sometimes it's literally luring them in by dragging in ships with them, by throwing the fucking comets behind the ship and all that shit. So it's like, it's that amazing turn where you're watching the show for like 15 episodes being like, somebody figure out this tracker shit. For the love of God, somebody open that thing up and at least try to investigate it. And you have this over and over and over again. And then finally they get rid of it. And you're like, well, they got rid of it. How are they still getting tracked? And I love the choice that you don't learn that information. And nobody's even has time on the show to question it because they're all in the middle of this fucking fighting. But if I remember for me, it's because I couldn't remember all those details because I haven't watched the show in like 6 or 7 years. I was like, how the fuck are they still getting tracked? Did like Tomino just forget or someone forget that plot point occurred, that they got rid of the trackers? And then it's that, oh no, it doesn't matter if the tracker is on them or not. If the Ideon wants them to be found in order to accomplish its goals, they will be found by the Buff Clan, and they can't escape. And it's that sense of they are fucking trapped. It doesn't matter. Whatever best efforts they're trying to commit are nothing in the face of this alien almighty intelligence that rules over their lives.
And this is where Ideon has such a clear, powerful place in Tomino's development, because the thing that makes Tomino such an interesting auteur, especially compared to a lot of the people in his age group who come up in anime at this time, like over on, the Ghibli crew with like Miyazaki and Takahata, or even other people kind of in the mecha space who will go on in different directions, is that Tomino never abandons TV. He is the guy who is always first. He makes a couple of movies, and they're great. But he is first, foremost, always a TV director. And he is so clearly animated always by this tension between the episodic 20-minute bound episode of television and the larger plot he is telling through the show. And we've traced this season on Japanimation Station how in his early first couple of shows, it's an uneasy tension. He doesn't quite know how to balance those two things. Certainly, Triton is like very samey episode to episode. Zambot has, I think, an issue where it can be very herky-jerky between those two movements of like, what is the overarching plot, what is the episode. Daitarn has to kind of abandon the overarching plot for him to really become very good at telling episodic stories, which he is. By the end of Daitarn, Daitarn is killer at that, right? Yes. The second half of that show it's awkward at first and it gets very good at it, and then Gundam, it all comes together. And with it all having come together in Gundam, where he very clearly understands how to craft individual episodes, how the repetition of serial television and episodic television can be something that actually helps, not hinders you, tell an overarching story, right? Because that is part of like, how do you trace the evolution of Amuro and Friends, is to have these kind of formulaic episode, like, plots that develop in unformulaic ways, and that is kind of the magic of Gundam. And then it feels like with Ideon, he takes a step further and says, okay, I figured out how to do that. Now, how do I weaponize it against the audience? And I think that's the magic of Ideon, is it becomes, you have that very Gundam-esque quality, I think, in the first half of the show, where, okay, this is very solid storytelling. It mixes in the human drama and the action really well. But then it becomes the formula of episodes of Buff Clan finds them, new person comes out, somebody is, and then the Ideon does something crazy and wins. It becomes exhausting in the exact right way he wants it to be exhausting, where you don't want the formula to happen anymore. You don't want to see them bound to this horrible machine that they are all enthralled to. You don't want to see yet another buff commander come through with their hopes and dreams dashed. There is in particular an episode near the very end, I think it's either episode 37 or 38, but it's one where you have this last minute brand new commander comes in, and I didn't even get his name in my notes because we've had so many of them at this point. And this guy's whole little spiel is that he has this like very Macross style, like Lin Minmei kind of idol he watches on his Holo TV. And like, it's so out of nowhere. It is this last minute piece of characterization. It feels like underdeveloped until the end of the episode, when he inevitably gets killed by the big wave gun and half of the fleet is wiped out. And the last thing that disappears from the cosmos is the hologram of his Lin Minmei-esque like lover he's watching. And it's like, oh no. This is the point, is that this is the formula being weaponized of every single one of these guys has had their little quirk, and now we're just compressing it. Instead of an arc with this guy, like we had with Damido or someone else, it's half an episode, and it is just, this is how much the Ideon is spilling, is speeding up this process of the formula is so brutal, and that's part of the horror of it down the home stretch.
Absolutely, like, because there is that, like, it goes from early on to being becoming eventually tedious when you're getting like, oh, here's yet another Buff Clan commander who will be here for 3 to 4 episodes before they defeat him. And you're right, that like when you're in that home stretch, it's just this like parade of new guys who come in and just get destroyed almost immediately. And all of them, it's almost like, it's like darkly comedic, because they all come in with some shit about like, oh, what's the big deal? Like, it's just one robot. I've like, one guy literally has that line. And you're like, dude, like, you have no idea what the fuck you're in for. And all these people with their petty ambitions on the Buff Clan side who all think that this is their path for promotion and all this stuff. And it's like, they're just so small in the face of this thing that they're going up against. And they're just so hilariously unequipped for it. And I do think the episode that really gets that is the one with you're talking about, with the character Galbaba Gura, which is what his name is, who is voiced by Tanaka Ryoichi, who is the Professor Briefs and the Elder Kai from Dragon Ball Z. So you want your cameo. There's a lot of good voice actors in here. Yes. But yes, it's him and his little hologram of his dancer fiance, and you have that amazing moment where his right-hand man or whatever is like, I think the men would appreciate, whatever. And he puts the projection on all the screens. And this is an amazing shot of all the Buff Clan dudes piloting the ship, just like pumping their arms up in the air because they're so excited by this like ballet dancer lady. And all of those people die a horrible fucking death in the arms of the Ide.
It is amazing to me that episode technically predates Macross. Like,
yes,
like there's something like it so feels like a parody, or like not a like hateful parody even, just like a fun kind of ribbing. And it can't be, but that's amazing. Right?
Yes, I mean, there is a lot of, like, this show must have been an influence on Macross, because the Ideon itself being this giant robot that's basically a ship, and that's what the super dimensional fortress Macross is. It's a big battleship that can also turn into the world's biggest fucking mech, even bigger than the Ideon. But yes, there is like, and it's just like some of like the Buff Clan do strike me similar. I forget what they're called, but the aliens that are obsessed with the proto-culture from Macross, there's definitely a similarity there.
Well, the core Macross crew met each other being a Gundam fan club in college. So, yeah, I'm guessing they watched Space Runaway Ideon. And I was just checking just to make sure my timeline was correct. And yeah, Macross premieres on TV 3 months after the Ideon movie is in theaters. So, yeah, I think there was some influence, definitely. And yeah, so I mean, just that is, it is so clear that, like, Gundam was Tomino, I think, fulfilling his promise as a storyteller and an auteur, and like nailing it and getting it so right. And Ideon is where he goes, okay, now let's get freaky with it. It's like so clearly his not missing a beat and saying, let's take everything we learned on Gundam and now let's weaponize it, let's change it, let's challenge it. And again, you would expect that 2 or 3 shows down the line from Gundam. I didn't think we would get it this quickly, and that's what made this such an amazing surprise for me. Is it just, this show really assaults you and takes you aback in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about in last week's episode, where in your brain, when you look at history, you want to separate out these things like distinct events. That Mobile Suit Gundam happens, and then Space Runaway Ideon happens, because when you look at the list on Wikipedia, that's 1979 Mobile Suit Gundam, 1980 Space Runaway Ideon. But again, he started planning out and came on as director for the show when Gundam wasn't finished airing. Like, there is still like 20, like 15 or something episodes left of Gundam by the time he was hired as the director for the show. So there is this sort of like, it's not exactly a response to Gundam. It's another expression of him exploring all these ideas he's coming out of as a creator. In many ways, I think it is much more a response of Zambot 3, because that is the show that he has done to completion, has had time to reflect on and kind of say, well, how do I do that show better? Like, what do I do? How do I do this like a godlike alien entity? How do I flip the compass of good and evil on its head? How do I make a big crazy ensemble show with a bunch of different characters that have that actually work? Because that very definitively did not work in Zambot 3, because you only had a couple of characters that stood out. One of them being the biggest asshole in the history of anime, the main character of that show. The other one being a guest character, who was the one voiced by Furukawa, who's his best buddy, who just comes in and out, and he's in like 5 or 6 episodes of the show, but isn't actually a main character. And Ideon takes all those things that Zambot tried. Most of them didn't fully really succeed at. Some of them truly kind of failed at. And here, Ideon just almost like the end result, once you're at the end of it, especially once we have the movie and we have the full picture of the ending, it looks back and you feel as it was like fucking effortless. Like the way in which it's so elegant, the way it's drawn across this whole show, that when you're in the midst of it, you don't have the perspective of what he's doing. And then when you look back on it from the end, you're like, Jesus Christ, like look how methodical this was. And I think this is where you get him doing the story treatment and the story outlines for every single episode before they even started making the first one. Gives you that sense of how clear visioned he was for what the show was, and how intentional every single step has to be to pull off the idea that he has.
Absolutely. And this is where I'm glad we did make the decision to at least talk about the different Gundam shows in their proper place, both so that we had Mobile Suit Gundam on the mind, even more than we usually do, as we went into talking about Ideon. But also now, when we go back and talk about like Zeta Gundam or Victory Gundam or G-Reco, like Ideon is going to feed into that a lot. Because like I do think the 2 Gundams this reminds me of, I said G-Reco earlier, I also think Victory Gundam has a lot of Ideon in it. Like less in some of its experimental stuff, but Victory Gundam is the other one that feels like, well, Zeta is like this, but I think in a slightly different way. Victory Gundam is so ensemble focused, and it is so, the main characters are so isolated. They're so like out there abandoned by the world in a certain way. I think the opening of Victory Gundam, which is on Earth, and it's a little bit of a slower burn as Gundam openings go in terms of getting everyone to the point that they had to air the opening out of order on Victory Gundam so that he'd get into the robot quicker. But I think like the opening episodes of Ideon reminded me a lot of the opening episodes of Victory Gundam, and the fact that Victory Gundam never really gets to a place where its characters are like superheroes in the way like Amuro is, you know. There's similarities there as well. So I'm excited to see how that gets teased out over time too. But yeah, it's just this show has so much of like a Rosetta Stone quality for a lot of Tomino's other work, and it's fascinating to see. Because yeah, I agree with you, Sean, what you said earlier of, at least of what we've watched so far, this one feels the most drawn from his id. And I think having had the experiences we've seen so far, where he's become a better and better storyteller each time out, the ability to take those id elements and make them expressible and accessible to an audience has become so clear.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just it's a different thread for him as a creator, and it's just wild to see that development that we have seen, and how like Gundam does feel like this true explosion, and once that like process has cracked for him, he immediately is able to turn around while making Gundam and start doing all this shit too. It feels like he became so liberated as a creator in that process of conceptualizing Gundam that it just totally changed his framework, whether he's making a Gundam type show or something like this.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is notable about this show is just how good the action is. Like, I think Gundam obviously has that quality where the action scenes in every Gundam are very, very fun and involving. Ideon has the extra layer where they are often meant to be horrifying, especially by the end of the show. But there's just something so distinctive also about the action in this show where it does move, as we said, into... Like, Gundam obviously has this kind of naval warfare component to it, but with the added element that you do have our main character Amuro in his own kind of solo vessel, which is the Gundam, having one-on-one fights. And that's never a thing. There are no real, like, duels a la the Duel in Texas episode of Gundam, except when people are on foot using, like, the lightsabers that they have in Ideon, which is, they are just lightsabers. There's no attempt to make those something else, and I love that. Also, this show was airing around the time Empire Strikes Back came out, and I love where you can see that influence with the number of like episodes set in asteroid fields, and there's an episode near the end where you have the sandworms that are just directly from the asteroid in Empire Strikes Back. I love that you can like line that up on the timeline. But but the actual like mecha action, it is so much more of like strategy, Star Trek-esque, like reminding me almost of the best Star Trek original series episode in this regard, which is the what's it called? But it's the one where they're fighting the Romulans for the first time, and you have like an actual like naval battle for the first time. Like so much of that is what this is doing. But then when you get into the Ideon actually fighting, I love that the episodes always come down to a point where the Ideon, for all of its machinery and weaponry and crazy attacks, there's just these desperate punches it does. And that starts pretty early on. But the way the Ideon is so physical in just kicking and punching and just tearing through things, and it becomes like you often have this movement in Ideon episodes, and this is what makes the action so dynamic, from this kind of like naval outer space warfare battleship dynamic that turns into a kaiju movie. And by the end of every episode of Ideon, you're dealing with the Ideon as basically Godzilla or an Ultraman villain or something that just has unknown depths to it where it can tear through, punch through, burn through whatever is in its path. And I think that's part of what makes the action feel so dynamic every time, because this is very strict on the Tomino formula. There is no episode where they don't get in the robot. They're in there every single time. But I think part of that evolution that you see every time is part of what makes that formula so dynamic.
Oh, absolutely. I think the action is just incredible, and is even a step up from Mobile Suit Gundam, which would often have very good action, particularly in very specific episodes, but would also have episodes where the action didn't always work perfectly. And here it is that sense of that blend of these different styles, and how the Ideon fighting is just so different than any other mech. There's the ways in which it evolves so dynamically over the course of the show. Because I love, like, early on in the first 5 to 6 episodes, mostly when they're still fighting on the solo ship or the first couple of episodes in space, there's just this sense of God, nobody on this thing has any idea what the fuck they're doing, and how they've just had to find like random nooks and crannies to rig up fucking missile launchers and weird like laser turrets and stuff that aren't part of the Ideon, right? Like part of like the whole fiction and setup here is that like they have had to bolt on their own control devices and things like that and weapons onto this existing relic of a giant robot that is also 3 big red trucks, which we need to talk about that again in a second, the 3 big red trucks of it all. But you have these amazing moments in some of those early episodes where like there's a guy firing his laser turrets at Buff Clan ships, and then they're like, we've got to dock, we've got to transform into the Ideon. And in the docking process, the dude's like viewport with the gun just totally gets blocked up by the other Ideon thing, and he's just like, hey, what the fuck? I can't see anything. And he's just fucking sitting there, I guess, in the dark for the rest of this fight. And all these just random missile pods they're trying to fire. And it is like they're attempting to use these actual military tactics, but none of it actually works out. And so it all just revolves into Cosmo going, ah, and just punching whatever it is. And the Ideon's so powerful that whatever they throw at it, the Ideon can just punch through it or kick through it in a single blow. And the Buff Clan are just powerless against that raw might of it. Until eventually the Buff Clan's primary strategy for fighting the Ideon, which is just deliciously ironic in how this works out, is that they identify the Ideon itself is practically indestructible. But the people inside of it aren't. And so they come up with all these tactics for how do we get at the people inside, and they try to fucking electrocute them. They try to bake them alive, basically. You eventually get like the psychic thing that's supposed to just like destroy their fucking brain cells, which is a really horrific piece of like world building when they're explaining how this crazy psychic ray works and just like torching the people inside. And so that's the thing that creates a threat for the Ideon, though not for the Ideon, for the people inside of it. But also the delightfully ironic thing is, as you start to learn that the Ideon is powered by people's like sort of earnest and innocent desire to survive, and it's that survival instinct, which is most pure in Piper Lu, who is an infant. That's the thing that charges the Ideon that it draws upon. So the more that they try to harm the pilots directly, which is the only way they can try to stop it, the more powerful the Ideon becomes. And that just creates this cycle for the Buff Clan where they just are orchestrating their own more creative and horrific demises for all the like inventive new weapons and powers that the Ideon comes up with in the second half of the show. And so that's one of those like fun, crazy little things about how the action works. But beyond all of that is also just the framing and the direction and the pacing and the editing of it is so creative and so interesting. And you do have some episodes that really stand out to me. One of them that is for me the most G-Reco episode of the show is episode 20, Attack the Twin Demons, which is where you have the 2 Bufu twins, no relationship to the Persona spell, I assume. I don't think they're ice element, but they are the Bufu twins. One of which, the girl, by the way, is voiced by Mami Koyama, the voice of Kaisuya Sabi. But that episode is just amazing, and it's got that super G-Reco type of action where they're coming up with this whole plan, and they're like they sink the solo ship halfway into the ocean, and then pump up the power for the barrier, which like flash evaporates the ocean, creating this layer of mist and fog and water around them that the beams and stuff can't go through and people can't see. And it's that sense of the use of the environment, or the crazy aliens on each planet, or the living fucking asteroid belt of like weird asteroids that try to eat any ship that enters it. And there's so many creative scenarios and creative solutions, and the way in which Cosmo becomes this very talented pilot who's coming up with all these crazy things. Like the first time in an early episode, I think it's probably 10 or 11, where he comes up with the idea to, while they're being grabbed by the enemy mecha, to just undock the top half of the Ideon while it's still in the head and arms, and just fucking pummel the thing with just the head and arms of the Ideon while it's like meaninglessly holding on and restraining just the body and the legs, is so good. And he, continues to develop those tactics throughout the show. But there is just such a brilliant creative idea and vision for how the action works, both in the minute, on an episode by episode, beat by beat, choreographed kind of way, but also on a maxi level for the show of how that action goes from, here are a bunch of people who have no idea what they're doing, they've cobbled shit onto this Ideon, they don't even know what they're doing, to such an extent that they don't even realize that the Ideon's doing half of the shit for them, is how ignorant they are, to, by the end of the show, they eventually get to learn what they're doing, but then at the end of the show, they once again have no idea what the fuck they're doing, because at the end of the show, the Ideon is just literally piloting itself and is moving levers on its own, is just completely taking control of it, and they are just sitting in a fucking metal box while this alien god splits a fucking planet in two. And they just have to sit there and watch it and be like, fuck, I don't know. It's just like, I hope this doesn't kill everyone on the solar ship. I have no idea. We're just going to be here for the ride as we destroy an entire planet with the single blow of the Ideon sword. I don't know. Fuck.
Yes.
And it's that whole arc is just incredible in how the action tells that story.
You're so right about episode 20, and I agree that there's a real G-Reco quality where you even have episodes that just start in the action and end in the action, and it is just pure kineticism that tells the story. That one, episode 20, isn't quite like that. That actually is the episode where we get the lore dump about the asteroids falling on the Buff Clan's Earth that started all of this. That doesn't come in until halfway through the show. But yeah, I just want to also stop here and say the Bufu twins, their names are Dova Bufu and Kiaya Bufu, and they pilot the Rog Mac and the Bog Mac, and I think it's amazing that you have twin devils whose names do sound like Muppets, basically, that they are fighting. Yeah. That episode also in my notes, like, there's so much, this show is so replete with amazing Tomino dialogue that I had to write down. When Kiaya Bufu, the second one who dies, goes in for their suicide attack, she says, "I'd rather die beautifully in battle than live as a second-class citizen," which I just had to pause the episode and write down, because oof. And then the narration in this show is so good. Oh my God. That episode has one of my favorites, where it ends with the line, "The solo ship departs on an endless wandering journey. Beyond them lies only the sparkling of countless stars." And like, I got excited every time I realized an episode was ending and the narrator comes on, because just peak Tomino narration, just pure poetry at the end of every episode.
Yes, so Shiozawa Kanato is the narrator for the show. He's also Jolliver in it. We've talked about him before. He's like Namu on Dragon Ball, Makave on Gundam. He's Rei in Fist of the North Star is probably his other most famous role he has. But it's just such a good voice. And it is cool because he's not the kind of actor that I feel like normally would be the narrator, because normally you go for that deeper voice, like a Ginga Banjo narrator, or Hirotaka Suzuki, read the openings for the titles for episodes of Gundam. He's got that very deep voice. Where Shiozawa Kaneto, right, a lot of his roles are Makave-esque, and he's kind of this kind of slippery figure, is a lot of times how he's portrayed, or the characters he plays. Not necessarily Jolliver, but in a lot of other stuff. But that's the kind of energy he brings to the narrative voice, and it is a cool choice. It gives you that sense of the mystery of what's going on. And yeah, the narration is so good, and how playful it gets near the end, where you have the episode where you learn at the very end that the solo ship is the thing creating the meteors that are hitting both the Earth and the Buff Clan's Earth. And in that one, he says a line that's like, it seemed as if the solo ship itself was giving birth to these meteors, but as a matter of fact, the solo ship was, and the meteor goes by the camera and he's cut off mid-sentence and it doesn't come up again. It's just amazing. You never learn how he's going to finish that. And then you get in, I believe it's the penultimate episode, is where it just is a 2-line narration, where he just goes, "The solo ship, the Space Runaway, Uchu no Tobosha," and that's it. And that's the whole narration for that line, or for that episode. It is just, the narration is particularly fucking good in this show.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Do you want to, since we just talked about Shiozawa, who is fantastic in this, do you want to talk about some of the other voice actors and characters that we have? Because this will also allow us to talk about a show that maybe has the best assemblage of Tomino names ever.
It's very good. I mean, I will have to say, as someone who's playing Super Robot Wars Y that has Heavy Metal Elgaim and Ore Battler Dunbine, there are some other...
Okay.
There's some heavier competition than I realized, because Space Runaway Ideon has always been a personal favorite of mine for the insane fucking names, particularly for the Buff Clan. But I have learned there's a name from Ore Battler Dunbine. I'm very excited to see this character because he's got the best name maybe ever.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna
well, because I mean, here's the thing. Compared to basically any other Tomino Gundam, other than maybe Zeta, this has just a huge cast. Zeta has a very, very large cast as well. The difference is Zeta is a 50-episode show that breathes a little more as it goes along. This is 39 episodes that becomes a mad dash to the ending. And of course, because of how many enemy commanders this show churns through, which is also a difference from, like, Zeta Gundam, you just have... He has to be coming up with new names every fucking 5 minutes on this thing, and he just doesn't miss.
Yes, yeah, and the Buff Clan have their whole crazy thing for names. Before you go through this, just on a point on the names, one thing crazy about the names of Ideon is I don't understand how Tomino's deciding who and what is the first or last name for characters. It's a complete mystery to me. The characters' names are rendered in katakana. Most of the human characters, or the Earthling characters, have clearly like Western derived names like a Cheryl Formosa or Bess Jordan. I would ignore the Bess part, but the Jordan part. But they're written in Japanese name order, which is not how he did Gundam. In Gundam, they're crazy fucking names, but they are written in katakana, but in Western name order, so it's first name first, last name last, or given name first, surname last. Here it is the surname first, the given name last, so it is Jordan Bess is how that character is referred to, but Bess is his given name. But the thing that's wild is it's the opposite for the Buff Clan people. So all the Buff Clan, they are also written in katakana, but for instance, Karada Ajiba, that is how the name is written. Karada is clearly her given name because Harudu Ajiba is her sister, but Ajiba is the surname and it comes second. So I don't fucking know what Tomino was on. Maybe at some point in his vision by 2300 AD, at some point the like English speaking world or something decided to adopt Asian name order, and that's just a part of the weird detail of the fiction of Space Runaway Ideon. But it makes it very confusing sometimes talking about these characters because I get the names flipped up. So
I guess it
preview.
I guess you could say it makes sense in so much as if you're working for a Japanese audience and you want the immediate human characters you're supposed to empathize with have Japanese name order, but then the aliens have a literally alien name order. They have the like Western name order. I don't know, but it is weird. The subtitles, I was watching the official High Dive subtitles, and they struggle with getting this right sometimes, I noticed. And it's hilarious. It's like when you have a name like Piper Lou, and you can write it as Lou Piper, they both make equal amounts of sense because it's a ridiculous name that is two first names. What do you do with that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's one where I think his name is supposed to be Lou Piper, but I just can't write it that way. It has to be Piper Lou. I'm sorry. They
say Piper Lou on the it's so crazy. Yeah,
it's bizarre. Anyway, so the name order, I don't know. Again, that's not how he did it in Gundam. I don't know. Tomino lost his fucking mind with the name shit in Ideon in a lot of ways. Let's talk about the characters and their delightful names, starting with the equivalent of our Gundam boy, our Ideon boy, Cosmo Yuki, played by Shinya Yoku, who we would know as he is the voice of Triton from Triton of the Sea before his voice changed. When he was a prepubescent, he was Triton, and at this point, he's obviously a man. His voice has changed. I just gotta say, Cosmo's my boy. I fucking love Cosmo so much. He's so good. It's one of my all-time favorite character designs. The fucking red afro, the big popped collar, the giant ass fucking knife he constantly has on his hip. It's like Cosmo walked so Choo-Choo from Witch for Mercury could run in terms of stuffing a giant afro of hair inside of his helmet that is no way big enough to fit it. And there is one episode where the helmet gets damaged and there's like this giant chunk of afro just shooting out the top of the fucking helmet. It is an amazing character design. His 70s fucking parachute pants, the whole thing. And it's a great character and a great performance. Like, I think Cosmo is an interesting character because we talked about early on, he's not really the protagonist. And he is more of an observer of events. He's someone on the outside of things that are happening, but he's not at the center of the drama. The center of the drama is typically Bess and Karada, and then whatever's going on with the Buff Clan. And Cosmo's there, and he's like the smart aleck on the side who has like a little comment. He's kind of poking at Bess and his sort of burgeoning affections for Karada in the first section of the show. There's that one episode where they get into a whole big fight in the elevator because Bess says, this is the one where Bess has the duel with the Buff Clan. It's the first lightsaber duel. And Bess says that unlike Cosmo, he doesn't make decisions based on emotion, and Cosmo just fucking laughs in his face and then punches him, because Cosmo's great. There's definitely a lot of Camille from Zeta Gundam in Cosmo, I think, in terms of his just sort of righteous indignation at the injustices and the hypocrisies of the world, and the kind of awkwardness of this teenage kid who's kind of a bit too smart for his own good, trying to navigate all those things. But then he just blossoms into this absolute fucking badass who's like, just after, you know, he goes through some big tragedies, you know, with the one military commander who tries to help him when he has PTSD. You then have all the stuff with Kitty Kitten. And through that, he just ends up being this, we'll talk about Kitty Kitten.
Sean, you just said the sentence, he then has all that stuff with Kitty Kitten, and this is Tomino. This is, it's because it's completely serious. That name is not played in any way, shape, or form for laughs. That is the Lala Soon of this show as far as the plot device goes, but her name is Kitty Kitten. And anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yes, her name is Kitty Kitten. But I do love just in the last home stretch of the show, there are just all these episodes where Cosmo is just doing the coolest shit, and he's fucking getting out in space in a jetpack and having lightsaber duels with motherfuckers on the fucking arms of the Ideon. And that, you know, he does have this kind of Amuro-esque arc where he starts out so in over his head, trying to do the best he can, really, you know, sort of like drowning in the stress of everything that's going on. And then he ultimately is like the most capable member of the crew, who has the best head on his shoulders, most clear-eyed about what's happening. You know, like when he's the one who's sitting on the edge of the conversation, or, you know, he's fucking leaning super cool on a fucking pillar in the background with his big ass knife, and then he puts in a little verbal jab. It's usually the thing that reorients the crew in the correct direction as they're questioning the Ideon and all that. And I just think the way that arc is portrayed, I think the voice from Shinya Yoku is just so good and captures the perfect energy that in many ways, you know, Amuro is like the protagonist for the whole real robot genre. But I think Cosmo is he's the blueprint that most Tomino protagonists from this point on are much more like Cosmo than they are Amuro, right? Someone like a Camille. I know the character from Aura Battler Dunbine is like this, because that's also voiced by the same voice actor who voices Camille, and it's a similar kind of character, at least based on Super Robot Wars Y. I know Brain Powered has this kind of character in it. You know, G Reko's main character is a lot more like this. Like, this is more the kind of character that Tomino leans to for his kind of gifted youth who's the pilot of the mecha. And I just think it's such a great character.
It's a wonderful character, and I think the thing that struck me about Cosmo is that I agree that there is a lot of Cosmo in future protagonists, particularly Camille. But one thing that is different about Cosmo from those protagonists is that by the end of this show, that sort of age dynamic that is very central, particularly to Gundam shows, where the main character is a kid and they're surrounded by or being led by adults, that is not the dynamic of Space Runaway Ideon. Cosmo is technically younger. I think he's supposed to be 16 or 17 or something like that, right? Yeah. He doesn't, by the end of the show, he does not function like that. There is no gap in, like, experience or wisdom between him and Bess. There is no sense that he is, like, bringing a younger or more hot-headed perspective by the end of the show. Really, he is, like, the rock of this crew by the end of the show, as you were describing. And I think the thing that fascinated me is, in those early episodes, I would say particularly because I know episode 9 is where I started thinking about him differently. And so in, like, the first 8, particularly the entire arc of getting off of the planet Solo, Logo Dao, Cosmo he's very reactive. He's there. He's not a big part of the story. He doesn't make the big decisions that are affecting things. This is why we say he doesn't function as a protagonist early on. He is much more buffeted by what is going on. But there's this moment at the beginning of episode 9, and that is the one, I believe, where Bess does the duel at the, or maybe not. That's the one where they're on the planet with all the dinosaurs. But in any case, that episode starts with a scene where all of the leads are in the greenhouse that is at the center of the Solo ship, which is just a coup of production design, by the way, is to have that greenhouse there in the middle of the bridge. But they're debating the issue of mercy, like how merciful do they be to the Buff Clan? And as that's happening, Cosmo flings a knife and seemingly kills a butterfly on a tree. But then the butterfly flies away, as Cosmo intended, because he actually got the knife right through its wings, and so it wasn't hit by it at all. And I think that is such a character-defining moment for Cosmo. It says so much about his frustrations, because part of that is he hates the amount of chatter they're putting into this, but also he has these hidden depths. He understands, without saying anything, the depth of the conversation these people around him are having better than they do, and he shows it with that moment of flinging the knife and not actually hitting the thing he thought he made them all think he hit. And a couple episodes after that is when we get episode 14, which was my favorite. 14 is the episode where Ideon becomes a great show to me. That is the one where it is this incredibly dense story where you have the commander Kamula, not Camila or anything, but Kamula, who is like the commander who you were talking about earlier, who helps Cosmo, and he becomes completely like he's like reawakened to fight after she dies. He yells out her name, Kamula Lanban, as he takes out their forces and all of this stuff. He has his, like what I called in my notes, his Eren Yeager moment at the end of that from Attack on Titan, where he says, "Damn Buff Clan, I'll obliterate you all," and like you have this like white light erupting from the Ideon's head. It's incredible. It's the kind of episode that would be 3 different episodes in anybody else's show, but Tomino just puts it all in one because there's such a clear arc between you start with Cosmo having this PTSD event where he's left blind inside the Ideon, and then he has this older woman who makes him feel safe, and then he loses her. But from that point outwards, I feel like Cosmo, those hidden depths that we see in that scene with the butterfly become his exterior, and he is someone who is, in addition to being a badass and a cool dude, thoughtful and like smart in a way that is really striking.
Yeah, that episode 14 you're talking about is definitely one of the most iconic Ideon episodes. It's one of the ones that is a clear precursor to Neon Genesis Evangelion, where you have the first 2 episodes of Eva, where you have the Eva going berserk and screaming and attacking the angel and all of that. Where at the end of this episode, that's where the Cosmo yells in his cockpit, and then you zoom out to the Ideon that then shoots that giant light from its visor, and it stands and it rears back and it yells and roars. It's the first time you hear the Ideon roar, and it's the first time you get like a true intimation in the text of the show that the Ideon is alive, that it is doing things of its own will. It's resonating in a different way with Cosmo. That's also the one where you get the first instance of a piece of animation they use a lot, which is a great piece of animation, where the Ideon puts its arms in front of it and it just fires every single missile at the same time. It's a great fucking shot. They use it in like almost every fight from this point forward because it's a killer shot. And it's also the episode where the first half of it is just horrifying, where Cosmo is trapped inside the cockpit of the detached like plane or whatever that he's a part of, as all the monitors go out and they're just bombarding it with fucking lasers, and he's stuck in there in pitch black, weightless, floating through space, hitting the fucking ceiling and stuff, totally blind to what's happening around him. It is one of those like where you start getting that sense of the horror of the show and how scary this is. That's like a very defining episode for both Cosmo but also the show in general.
Totally. And I was writing a lot in my notes on this one because it feels like a real evolution moment in the path from like getting from Amuro to Camille, for instance, where I think the thing that so distinguishes Tomino's approach to characterization is psychological interiority. Yes. And I saw someone, I was researching something for my Miyazaki class, and I saw someone make this comparison on the Japanese internet, saying that the thing that differentiates Miyazaki and Tomino, and you would think there's a lot of things, but I thought this was a really canny point, is Miyazaki is so brilliant at showing you the exterior of characters. His characters live and breathe through how they look and how they move through the world, and we are often actually denied, intentionally, some of their interiority, and we're left to kind of ponder that and see it through action and all of that stuff. And Tomino is someone who shows you the interior of people. Like his whole style, the fact that Tomino is so experimental, the way his entire like kind of fractious storyboarding style develops, the way he eventually starts embracing some really experimental imagery, he is about states of mind and the interiority and the psychological depth of people. And I think you really see that start to blossom in this episode of Ideon, episode 14, and later on, where I wrote my notes, this is all about portraying someone's state of mind, not about portraying like like I feel like Cosmo is less a character design that is like a solid thing in that episode than a state of being that we are experiencing through the medium of animation. And that is like so my impression also later on of Camille and other characters as well, where like the character designs are good and the character animation is good, but so much of how the character is portrayed to us is through all these things around the edges to try to get us into their brains and the way they think and the way they react.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the thing where, you know, I think with like the Miyazaki kind of style, it's that there's an honesty to those characters of like what they're expressing is so honest and complete and full. Whereas for Tomino, his characters are full of contradictions where they will say things or do things that is the opposite of what they feel, but they do them in such a way where it creates a gap between your expectation of the reality of what's occurring, and through that gap you can see the character, right? And that's like, you know, I think the perfect, clearest example of that is Amuro in Gundam, abandoning the white base, and when he does it, he takes the Gundam with him, right? When they decide to take him off the Gundam, he overhears the conversation between Bright and Mirai, and he steals the Gundam and flees into the dark of night, which is this insane choice, this huge choice, this thing that's crazy, that is so kind of like against the logic of everything you would expect a person to ever do. It's so overly dramatic, but that's this gap, that through that gap you see the boy Amuro, who has just grown so attached to the Gundam. It's so like a part of himself and his psyche. He physically cannot be removed from it. That a reasonable action of if I can't be on the Gundam, then I'm going to leave the white base. What am I doing here? Turning into I'm going to leave the white base and I'm going to take the fucking Gundam with me. Like that is this sort of extreme moment that kind of goes over this edge where I think you get to witness the interior workings of Amuro's brain and see the psychological reality of who this character is. And that's like a really extreme moment, but I think it's how Tomino writes all of his characters. And so you have these things like that moment of Cosmo throwing the knife and sticking, but not sticking the butterfly. It's kind of this weird fucking thing that a character does. And the lines that people say are a little bit off kilter. That creates that very Tomino sense of dialogue. But like the reason why you have those kinds of weird off kilter moments is because I think he's trying to create that remove from the exterior of the character to create the gaps through which you can see their interior like reasoning, their motivation, the thing underneath it all that oftentimes the characters themselves are not aware of that is driving them forward. And that all goes back to the pitch that he has for this series where he says, we want to take seriously the real sensation that each individual character is truly living. They don't simply operate based on a sense of duty or orders. Instead, each individual person, when granted a lifestyle and set of values, will create a more vivid, dramatic world. And that's, you know, what he's trying to do. He's trying to create these people that are internally inconsistent, that have these weird quirks or, you know, perversions of their behavior. And through that, you can see this kind of deeper level of their psyche, because the only character on the solo ship that I think is like a totally honest person for most of the show is Karada. And she is the one who is like, she's like a Miyazaki character in many ways. And she's just totally open, honest, earnest about who she is. She's like this truly good, capital G, good person, because she's the one who crosses the boundary to be with these aliens, and is the only person until like deep into the show that truly makes that leap.
She's the only person with like an ideology she is bound to, that she believes in, that she will put her life on the line for. And it's not that the other people are bad, but like the solo crew, they're survivors of an attack.
Yes.
They have no time to think about that. She is this person who gets to make this active choice. And yes, that just having someone like that on the ship is such an animating force of drama by force of contrast.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the thing that gives this richness to the cast, where I think you just get that Tomino has gotten so good now between that last episode of Daitarn where we saw this style where we broke down that weird fucking conversation he has with Kodosu, where you can see it really clearly. It's all over the place in Gundam, and it's even deeper here. And this is like what we'll see with Zeta, and especially Victory Gundam and Turn A Gundam, right? He like goes really deep into the style until you arrive at G-Reco, where he's gone so far down it that he's alienated most of his audience, other than the truly diehard faithfuls who are super deep into this shit.
And who will be really annoying if you ever diss G-Reco in their presence, and you need to go on and explain why it's like the best anime of the 2010s. Anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. All right. Other main characters here. We've got Tanaka Hideyuki as Bess Jordan, my boy. I love this voice. I love this actor. He would have been in Tomino before as Lieutenant Woody in Mobile Suit Gundam.
Yes.
Woody Daijo. It's just, we love Woody.
Pour one out for Woody.
I want to thank you, Sean, for putting a One Piece character on your outline, because he is indeed Don Quixote do Flamingo in One Piece, who is one of the most major villains. So a big role there.
It's a name I recognized, so I was like, well, if I recognize that name, surely this must be an important character from One Piece.
Yes. Until recently, the longest arc in the manga, until you got to Wano. That was the Doflamingo arc. And then he's Detective Conan's dad in Detective Conan. But this is my favorite performance I've heard from him. I think Bess is such a fascinating character. I love how he is in the position of Captain Bright, or maybe for the Star Trek comparison, Captain Kirk, but he is not any of those guys.
No.
He is someone who is very in touch with his feelings, but he is not necessarily in touch with like military strategy and all that, but you love him anyway. And that vocal performance is just tremendous, I think. It is in the realm of this show where I said like the characters are so human and normal. I think Bess is the one I think of when I say that. And I think it's because of Tanaka's performance.
Yeah, and it's a good example of what we're like with the Karada thing, of that she is this person who has this like true ideology that she like very honestly lives by. And Bess, I would say, is like the next most upstanding person. He's the closest to that, which is, I think, makes sense why he and Karada end up together. But he does also have more of a kind of like, material, I don't want to say lustful is maybe too harsh, but, I think like clearly his romantic interest in Karada is a really huge driving force for him for the whole show, but especially early on, which is why he takes little pot shots from Cosmo and Cheryl and others who see that this is happening. And you get this sort of like slow developing budding romance between him and Karada. But I do think like, Karada would have joined the people on the solo ship if Bess was there or not. Most of the shit that Bess does in the show is driven by his affection and his love for Karada, which is not a bad thing, but it is like the thing that defines him as a person so much, as he is willing to go to these extreme lengths to help all these people, to be this sort of weird de facto leader of this ragtag crew, but also because he is so enamored with this incredible woman that he meets, whether she's a fucking alien or not. And I do love that like arc in those early episodes where everybody else is against it. Everybody is like, why the fuck do we have this alien lady on this ship? And he is her one defender. And it's like, yes, his critics on the crew are right. Like, it is because partially he wants to have sex with her. He has this powerful desire for her, but also it is because he is a good dude as well. And he's also very cool because in the first episode, when the aliens attack, he fucking leaps out with a lightsaber and cuts the legs off of like one of the big walker things and just fucking goes out there like a badass. So it makes sense that someone would fall in love with him because he is a very cool guy. But yeah, he's just a great character.
Well, and it's interesting because he's not like a natural military commander as we see, but he is that like natural kind of like North Star morality he has that allows him to see not just the use of Carla on the ship, but that she is a good person, that she means what she says, that she is worth defending, even though in the short term it creates a lot of headaches for him. That is like really key to his entire development on the show, and just a really interesting dynamic because, like, again, you inevitably compare this to Tomino's previous work, especially because the initial setup is similar. And Captain Bright would not have let Carla on that ship. Like, that's
he would have killed her.
Yeah,
he would have shot that alien lady.
And I guess understandably so. Like, I don't think it's because Bright is a bad person. He's a different kind of person and leader, and he is in a different kind of desperate situation. But like, no, and on some level, it is crazy if you're trying to be the captain of this ship to also invite the alien lady on. You are just inviting mutiny. But like, Bess makes things harder for himself in interesting ways that make him compelling as a character. Yes,
absolutely. And you do have a couple big moments with Bess, like you have episode 31, The Homeland Burns. This is that one episode that was not based on an outline by Tomino, but it's still a really good episode because this is the one where the Earth government uses his parents to try to convince him not to go. And all that stuff with him and Cosmo locked in this jail cell, which is good just because it had been a long time at that point since you had those two together. Because early on, there's just so much good friction between him and Cosmo. And it's fun in this episode that they're kind of aligned, but you also see how Bess, his refusal that he can't look at his parents because he can't be tempted by this idea of leaving the solo ship because he's got so much responsibility and so much on there. And I screenshotted in my notes the ending of that episode where the dad tears up all these childhood photos he had brought of Bess, including one that is a great photo of him where you see him like in American football gear, which is just a real like, yes, of course, he was the fucking quarterback for his high school football team or whatever. Is very much feels like the kind of guy that Bess was. He's like the jock with a heart of gold. But then you have this amazing sequence where the pictures fly by, or the shreds of the pictures, and you get one of adult or of high school Bess, then you get one of like what looks like 10-year-old Bess, then you get one of infinite Bess, and then you cut to the solo ship where Bess is looking down at his parents as it's flying away. Almost as like feels like a you could compare this to the shot from the end of the Coming Home episode of Gundam against the sunset on the beach of him making this choice to leave his parents behind. But the tragedy of just how thoroughly he is not part of that world. He's not part of the Earth anymore. He's not part of those people. He can't go back to them. Like, it's one of those moments in the last 10 or so episodes of the show where you get this true feeling of the solo ship is its own entity. The people who are on there are not Earthlings. They're not Buff Clan. They're something totally new. And this is one that's like, there's a couple of like point of no return moments, and this is Bess's, and it's just a great moment.
My favorite visual composition in that scene is one of the last shots of the episode is of the solo ship is rising up above the parents as they walk through this ruined town. And so the solo ship is in the top third of the frame. There's this ruined town, and the parents are dwarfed down walking through the street. And then you cut to Bess. He's literally standing on the hull of the ship, looking down as the ending song is playing as an insert. It's just an incredible moment. It actually reminds me both Coming Home, but like also the scene. It's a totally different scene, but like the flamingos rising in Jaburo in that episode of Gundam that they use as the end of Gundam Movie 2, where it's just like the sense of like verticality and sky and space. It's a really big image, especially for the TV show to do. I also want to note that episode, just because I noticed this in my notes, has a scene that I'm surprised did not cause a Pokemon-style seizure controversy in Japan, where you have the later episodes of Ideon do this a lot, and frankly, I actually do think Ideon should probably come with a warning for anyone who is sensitive to like strobe light imagery, but episode 31 has a particularly bad version of it where there's this crazy red-white strobe light effect as the Ideon powers up that I literally had to look away from the screen. It gave me a headache. I was worried about myself. And I just thought I was like, oh man, it's all right. Pokemon didn't get this out of nowhere, huh? This anime was playing with fire for a long time.
Yes, because that's the moment where Rikuku, who's the Buff Clan commander at that point of the show, has come up with the brilliant plan. What if we drain the energy from the Ideon? The one thing we know about it is that it's infinite energy. Presumably she thought that it's quote unquote infinite energy, but it's like, well, it's not literally infinite energy. It's like, no, lady, it is actually an infinite source of energy. It is the worst plan the fucking Buff Clan ever come up with, is let's drain the energy from the fucking Ideon. It's like, oh, nope, that's not gonna work.
No. That is an amazing plan there.
Yes.
All right, so who do we have next, Sean?
Next up, we have who I think is probably the best and most compelling character of the show, and is the best vocal performance for me, is Inoue Yo as Cheryl Formosa. She's also Piper Liu, the baby, but Cheryl's obviously a bigger character here. Inoue Yo, of course, is Sayla in Mobile Suit Gundam. We also talked about her in Daitarn 3 as Reika, and she's been in many, many other great shows. But this is just one, I think, an incredible character, and is an even more incredible performance, especially when you get in the home stretch. Because this is the character that goes by far on the biggest arc, because she starts off intentionally being a really acerbic character, one that is just like pushing back against every member of the crew. She's the loudest critic of Karada, a character that the audience is supposed to like. She is constantly insulting other members of the crew, insulting their plans, demanding that they do these things to try to study the Ide, even when it is kind of unreasonable, right? And she's just this very kind of toxic member of the crew who slowly, through her relationship with Karada, that at first, like, she's actively trying to get Karada killed in multiple episodes, but you have the moment where she uses Karada as like a hostage to try to leave the solo ship. That ultimately doesn't work, but Karada lies about it and says that she was the one that threatened them, rather than the reality was just Cheryl that threatened and forced her. And at that point, she becomes indebted to Karada, and you see the slow evolution of her as a character as she starts to come around to this bigger worldview of her being a part of this crew, of her being a part of that family, of Karada being someone who can be like a real trusted ally and friend to her. Cosmo, who she and her constantly were throwing little barbs at each other, gained this kind of begrudging respect. And then slowly all that grows into her relationship with DJ when he comes onto the show. And then Cheryl ends the show in the most dire of conditions, where her sister's dead, Gijay's dead. She's taken to alcohol, which we'll talk about that scene, which I think is just one of the best scenes in the show, is her last scene with Gijay, where she's drunk in her room. And then she ends the whole series for the TV version, like dancing like a mad lady on the deck of the solo ship, inviting the destruction of all of creation by the Ide, because she's the one who has most potently felt the nature of them dancing in the hand of this alien god they can't comprehend. And I just think the arc of that character, how it's portrayed in the show, and especially how Inoue Yo voices her, is just incredible.
I couldn't agree more. This is definitely a character I want to kind of put a pin in and make sure we revisit when we talk about the movies, because I am just imagining there's more with her there. Because she is a character who ends this show mid-evolution, right? Like, because she is in a state where, like, a lot has happened to her. She does get, I think if the ending to the TV version works at all, it works because she is on the bridge drunk, laughing about how they're all going to die. Like, that's a perfect moment. But I do feel like, having only seen the show, I'm not sure I have the full picture. There's a lot of things I feel like I don't have a full picture of, for obvious reasons.
My favorite scene with this character is in the movie. Yes, there is stuff that we have not gotten to yet with her. That's
yeah. So I'm not wrong about that. But I do agree. Like, she is someone who, so much of this show is predicated on how things evolve and change. And that's where we started this conversation, talking about how this show is kind of a Trojan horse. But Cheryl is, like, of the characters in the cast, the most representative of that quality, because she is very unlikable early on in this show, right? Like, she is really brittle. She's, like, very reactive to things. The way she is cruel to Karala feels so unearned in so many ways. And, like, there were multiple points I wrote in my notes, like, Karala, dear, like, just, you do not deserve any of this. Like, quit letting these people fuck with you. But, of course, Karala is a better person than that, so she lets them fuck with her. But, like, Cheryl grows into someone whose humanity you understand so fully, because, like, there's this real fear underlying everything, and you understand it. She's not a soldier; she's a fucking researcher,
Yeah.
who was just trying to learn about these sixth civilization artifacts. She comes to think they might be her salvation. She is the one who I think most acutely feels and understands the way they are actually their damnation. And, of course, she ends the show having fully internalized that in a way that makes her broken, in a way that I think very much the audience understands. And so her going from someone who I think you feel pretty distant from because she is so harsh, to someone whose humanity is just, she's an open nerve. She's an open wound, and you understand that. And yeah, Inoue Yo, who of course we have talked a lot about. She's Reika, she's Sayla, she's one of the main actors Tomino leaned on in this period. This is her best performance I've ever heard. Yes. She's been in a lot of wonderful things. This is a tremendous performance.
Yeah, I think it's just something where I think you can feel that Tomino at this point knows how good she is, because I think this is like such a hard character, because you're being asked to play a character that's really, truly unlikable. It's been intentionally written to be very unlikable to the audience early on, so that she can go on the most dramatic arc of any character. And I think when you get to those big moments, so there's episode 29, the Sword of Light episode, which obviously, like, the big thing that people are going to remember from that episode is that's where the fucking Ideon sword comes out. And we'll talk about that part of it later. But that is the episode where Guille becomes part of the crew. And you have this really incredible scene between the two of them at the beginning of the episode where you have these series of really super tight close-ups on them as they look each other in the eye. And Tomino uses this little, like, kind of storytelling, almost like blocking trick to show this sense of, like, Guille's determination versus Cheryl's hesitation, because you have this kind of, like, 3-point movement she does where she kind of half looks at Guille. She looks down almost towards the camera for a moment, and then she turns and looks fully at him, completely in silhouette. And then you have a close-up on him looking at her almost as a reflection on that. And so you have this, like, really tight connection with them. Then at the end of that episode, after all the sort of light shit has come down, Guille is in his room. She opens up the door. You have the same moment where she looks at him. She turns to the side, reflecting, like, this hesitation of should I go. Then she looks back to him and engages with him, and he is left in the dark after their conversation, which is then replicated on the flip side in episode 38, where after Cheryl's sister has died, Guille goes to comfort her. He is now the one at the door where she is sitting in her room in the dark, broken, sitting alone. And he then fully crosses that boundary, comes in, sits on a cushion next to her. They share this drink with each other as he tries to comfort her. And she is falling apart. Right. And there's this very clear implication that they sleep together, where you know that Tomino at this point is trying to find ways for him to stretch the boundaries of how he can represent sex on screen. It's something in my book on this stuff, that where there's some quotes about him talking about the scene between Char and Lala in Gundam, where they're watching the footage from side 6 of the white base escaping, and Lala has this premonition that the white one is going to win. And Tomino tried to direct that scene and direct the actors in that scene to create the clear implication that they have had sex and that there's this physical relationship between the two of them. This is something he's going to do much more obviously in Char's counterattack. But I think this whole romance between the two of them, Cheryl and Guille, where there's this powerful physical connection, the sense of hesitation between them and this difficulty in crossing the boundary of that, symbolically, of that door, and that ultimately being crossed by Guille in this moment of her fully being distraught. She's gone to alcohol, which is already a striking scene to have in what is nominally a kid's show, right? That she's drunk alone in this room, and that he is there to try to comfort her, but he can't really truly do it. Like, I forget what his line exactly is, but he says something to her that's a bit of a cliche line that is not quite the thing she wants him to say, because she wants him to say that he loves her, right? And she's not quite saying it. And she says, I like that thing about you, as she leans back and caresses her own neck. Like, that's the thing I like about you, or I love about you, Guille. But then she leans forward and says, isn't there something more that you could say? And then she embraces him. And it's just such a tender scene, such a powerful scene of this alien who's a villain in the show, who's one of, like, the earliest bad guys we had, who's gone on this whole crazy journey, who has, in this short span of time, 9 episodes, developed this connection with Cheryl, that you have this very mature, very adult, very complicated representation of this relationship of two people trying to come together, trying to love each other, and it not really working out, obviously, because also Guille ultimately dies at the end of that episode. And I think it's just one of the great scenes in Tomino's oeuvre are both those, their meeting and then that scene at the end of there. And it is one of those moments where the lyrics of that, of the ending theme, if you're trying to interpret, like, the things that it means, one of the things that the lyrics of that ending theme are about to me is very much the relationship between Guille and Cheryl. This idea that they're licking each other's wounds, playing the fool, right? That we had a sudden brush of shared affection, but we're only playing the fool, licking each other's wounds. This idea of if we're separated, it will be a relief, right? That it will be a relief if we are gone, which is the middle verse. I need to give you sympathy to your parched skin blasted by tears. And then the last verse of the song, even after death we'll meet again in time, to keep on living will only bring you sorrow. We had a sudden brush with love that we try to bottle up merely as memories. Now, that bottle up expression is not a pun on sake. That's to be that's my translation is inserting the
Yes.
bottle up expression. But like the way that relationship between those two characters fully embodies what the lyrics of that song are talking about, which I think is the guiding star of Tomino's relationships for all the characters in the show. I just think it's like one of, for me, the most memorable parts of this series. And yes, there's more with Cheryl that goes even deeper into this. I mean, Guille is fucking dead in the movie already by the time the movie basically starts. But so there's not more between the two of them, but there's another place for Cheryl to go. But I do, like, this is just one of those things in relationships that is the most vibrant in my memory of the first time I watched this show, of just how compelling it is and how different it is from like any other anime you're going to watch. And it's a very like quintessentially Tomino kind of relationship he's expressing on screen here.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm really glad you went deep with all of that, because it's so true, and I agree with that pair of scenes and everything between her and Guille. And just one more word on, Inoue and how phenomenal she is here. I think there's something about watching this show and thinking about how good her work is here that actually clarified for me why, when there were difficulties getting her back for Zeta and Double Zeta and the later stuff for her to replay Sayla, that Tomino just never went to the option of recasting or anything like that. And I don't know if there were contractual issues or something else going on there. But like, I can understand, especially having heard her here, that if that is a character voiced by Inoue and your choice is either to have the character and have her reading the words or have to recast, you just don't have the character, right? Like, there's something, I can understand why the link to that actress is so strong, having now seen the evolution from Daitarn to Gundam to this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, that's all in the span of like within 2 years. It's not even a full 2 years have passed across all of those performances. And it's just really remarkable. And it is just like, you watch some of those scenes in the last 10 episodes with this character and they're so good. I mean, all the stuff of her reacting to her sister's death, where she is, there's have that really brutal line where she says, I never really was the proper kind of sister to you, because it is this thing where, Lynn is a member of, a supporting character. She's not like a main character of the show, but she's in most episodes of the show, at least a little bit. But there's so few interactions between her and Cheryl. And at first that feels like that's like a weird missed opportunity, where it's like, why are they never showing these two sisters together? It's so rare. Whenever they're together, it's Cheryl, being very kind of bossy and demanding of Lynn to do something to get the fucking kids off the deck or whatever. But that, like, it becomes clearly so intentional looking back on it, because once Lynn is dead, Cheryl's main regret is that she never really followed through on that relationship. That relationship was there, this connection was there, her family was on that ship with her, and she was so blinded by all the other things going on in her life that she never embraced that connection, and instead just constantly was throwing little pins and needles at Lynn and criticizing her. It's one of the things that makes that whole sequence of that death so powerful, and I think one of the reasons why you really believe that Cheryl will just psychologically collapse after that and not be able to really recover, because of how it's not just the loss of the sister, it's the realization of the failure of her life up to that point, that relationship being cut off means there's no going back. It's just really powerful stuff.
Since we just talked about him a ton, can we just talk about Guille here? Because he's so central to this. The Guille Zarl, as his full name is, because Tomino, voiced by Hayashi Kazue, who you've noted here is also Nanba Yasuo in Space Battleship Yamato. It's a phenomenal performance, obviously. Guille is such an interesting character, because I think in those early episodes, you kind of have a flurry of enemies, right, that could turn out to be kind of your main figure on the Buff Clan side. And I don't think it's clear right away that Guille is going to be the one who will stand out and stick around, but he does. He's there for most of the show. He is this constant foe. He is finally abandoned basically one too many times. I wrote in my notes, he gets the same fate as Shin Asuka in Gundam Seed Destiny. He's abandoned on the moon. And then, of course, but his story continues from there, unlike Shin Asuka, and he comes onto the crew. And I love the transformation of that character. He has, when when Cheryl discovers him and she kind of puts him in a room to like stay away from the crew, but she believes like his story of he wants to see the power of the Ide, and she leaves. He kind of sulks in his chair and he says, "Oh, I am such a shameless man." And I wrote like, that is the most Tomino line of all time. That is such a Sharas novel line. It is so great.
Yes.
But like
I'm thinking of doing something wicked, Amuro.
I know.
But it's that kind of line. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And Gijay is he's such a like Shakespearean character in that home stretch where like, and I say Shakespearean because he's one of those characters like Hamlet whose motivations are not fully clear even to him. And the narrator says that to us in the episode where he feigns going back to the Buff clan to draw them in so that the solo ship can destroy them. But it's noted that like he did it on such instinct, it's not even clear if he was actually feigning, right?
Yes.
Was it battle strategy or did he actually want to go back? But he does have this desire to learn about the Ide, and of course, in episode 38, he gets, I think, probably the best death in this show, which is where because at that point, he has replaced Moera as one of the 3 pilots of the Ideon, and he's like the smartest one in terms of military strategy because he's an actual soldier. But he gets like hit by this laser. And then you have the Ideon do this. Another crazy light show goes, nuts. That is where is that where it splits through the planet, right?
Yes,
and
that's where it slices the planet in fucking 2 pieces.
Yeah, literally splits it in half. And then we come back and Gijay is dead, sitting fully upright, eyes open. He looks like, what I wrote in my notes, he looks like he's frozen in time. It looks like visually what happened is that his soul just got consumed by the Ide and drawn out, dying at the moment he beheld this thing he longed to see. And I know literally what happened is there's this like laser beam that comes through and cuts him, but that is like visually, symbolically what it feels like happened. And it's why, even though it feels kind of sudden for him to die on the verge of the climax beginning, it feels so perfect. And obviously it is also this animating force for Cheryl to go into her last phase of characterization. But man, what a character.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that scene is incredible because you have all the stuff going on where the Ideon is slicing the planet in 2, and it's just fucking chaos and bedlam, and the soundtrack's going crazy, the sound effects are going nuts, and then you just have this brief moment. This is after Gijay has been presumably cut in 2. Like, you're meant to understand that his bottom half has been basically disintegrated because you're never shown it, but that's what the framing kind of implies. And that has already occurred, and the planet's being cut in 2, and then you have this moment where you just cut the close-up on Gijay's face in the helmet with the beam reflected in his eyes, and all the sound cuts away, and you just have the actor, like, super close-up on the mic, bring, like, say this line of, is this the manifestation of the Ide, I like to use the word invoke to translate the word they're using, because it's what the subtitle in Japanese is for be invoked. So it's like, is this the invocation of the Ide, is kind of what he's saying there. And that's his last moment alive. And it cuts then back to the planet getting cut in half, chaos and bedlam. How to do is like, let's bring in our whole like fleet. And then she sees the planet being cut in half, is like, let's fucking retreat. Let's get out of here. Oh fuck. And the planet gets cut completely in 2. And it is pretty fucking nuts. And pouring out for Gijay, he was a real one.
And actually, that moment you mentioned there, it's not the sound fades out, Sean. It's that you have full blaring, Sugiyama music. It just cuts. Suddenly no music, mid like phrase of the music. And he has that line. And then we go back and a new Sugiyama piece starts. And so like the brutality of that moment, the quiet of it is so striking. Yeah, Gijay is at the heart of a lot of the best moments in this show. Absolutely. Yeah.
And he goes through a good image change where he had his whole like sort of bangs and all that stuff early on, and then he meets I believe on the guy's name Dadam, I think, his commander, who has the slicked back hair, and I love that when he's with the slicked back hair guy, Gijay slicks his hair back too. It makes him look way better, but I do love that he gets picked up by this guy with this very slick look. He's like, I'll try that out too. You gotta love Gijay.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see. Next up, we've kind of talked about her a little bit, but we have Toda Keiko as Karada Ajiba, whom, she was a big voice actor at this time. She was Matilda-san from Gundam. She's Anpanman in Anpanman, and she's also Hitomi Kisagi in Cat's Eye, she's the main character of that show. She was also very briefly married to Ikeda Shuichi around this time, so that's another fun fact for you about Toda Keiko. Of course, she was also the singer for the ending theme of this song. or for the show. And Karada is that, particularly early on, she is like the linchpin of the show. She is that kind of like, I think most effective, like clearly the protagonist character, because all the drama revolves around her. She is this bold person who goes to try to bridge the gap between the Earthlings and the Buff Clan. And then I like her slow development from this pure ideologue to someone who develops these really powerful familial attachments to the solo ship, to the point where she is willing to like lie and cheat. Obviously, there's a lot more with Karada in the movie, but you do, like in the last episode, you do end with her on this moment where she is actively threatens her father. She deceives her father by pointing like a tool at him, but pretending it's a weapon. She lies to him. She goes out, grabs that fucking gun while they're doing the spacewalk with Jolliver, and it's shooting Buff Clan people. So you do have this very dramatic transformation for her as a character, from someone who's effectively a true pacifist to someone who is willing to fight and kill for the sake of her family. You know, obviously she has her unborn child with Bess, but also just like this belief she has and this faith she has that like the Ide can bring the world to a better place, that she never really abandons, but realizes that it's something she needs to truly fight for if she wants to see it actualized. It's a really cool arc for that character.
It's a really cool arc, and that final episode is such a trip, because that moment where in the final episode, you have that Carla is coming back. The Ideon tries to rescue her. As the Ideon reaches out, that ship gets shot and blows up.
Yes.
And you presume Carla is dead. And it is and ultimately she isn't, sort of, asterisk. I'm not 100% sure what happened there because I haven't seen episode 40 because, you know, that was not intended to be the finale. But in any case, it feels like such a transgression, because if you had to identify one character on that crew who needs to be around to the end of the story, it's clearly Carla. I would believe killing off Bess, Cosmo, Cheryl, all of them before Carla, because she clearly has to be there for the resolution of the story, right? And like, suddenly she's gone. And so that's that moment where you get this massive freak out from Cosmo that is kind of it's the cosmic glow moment of the series, basically, where he freaks out about killing Carla. He says her idealism might have been the key to holding back the Ide. Nobody knows what will happen if the Ide's power is released. You bastards, are you bastards going to take responsibility for it if it does? You bastards. And like, that moment is sold on the fact that like, this is the most unthinkable thing that could happen narratively for us, and I think emotionally and morally for Cosmo, and it's fucking wild. And then she comes back inside a glowing orb, and the show goes nuts. Yeah, but we can talk about that later. But yeah, great performance by Toda Keiko.
Yes. It's a great performance. It's a great character. And I do love early on, this part of like the great kind of science fiction writing of the show, where everybody assumes that she like knows everything about the Buff Clan and all that. They're trying to interrogate her. And there's that one episode where Cheryl goes so far as to hook her up to this like brain scanning interrogation machine or whatever. And that's when they realize that she doesn't know jack shit. I mean, it's not that she doesn't know anything. She does have some good intel, but she's not the leader of the fucking Buff Clans. She's not even a member of the military. She is a scientist. But she's also kind of like an ideologue. She's not an expert in science. She's probably more like a folklorist or something, because she knows all the story and the history of the Ide, but she's here on the belief of that, like the mythology of it, not here on a scientific pursuit. And so she's got some basic working knowledge because she's related to a military family. She knows some of the, like, oh, I recognize that mech because I've seen it before. But she doesn't know how, like, they track people through fucking space. She doesn't know, like, the maps of the fucking universe or whatever to track back the Buff Clan Earth. You know, she can't do any of that shit. And I love that moment of them realizing, like, she's just a person. Like, of course she doesn't know everything about the Buff Clan and their military operations and how to track stars and stellar maps and all this kind of stuff. It is a great way that kind of grounds that character, where you realize, yes, she's very smart. Yes, she is this like very charismatic person, but no, she is not the key to defeating the Buff Clan or whatever. She can't ever be that.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, then we have, Sean, in your list, we have Kasha Imhoff, voiced by Shiraishi Fuyumi. And Kasha is the character with more unbridled bloodlust than anyone else in Tomino's entire filmography. She is the one arguing for genocide. She is the one arguing for killing all the Buff Clan members. She is no mercy at any point, but you also come to understand why she is the way she is, and I love this character.
Yes, I love Kasha so much. Shirai Shifumi, of course, is Mirai in Gundam. She's also Topo in Daitarn. This is
Yes.
a little less notable role, but I do love Mirai, who's like the gentle mom of the white base, now turning around in this, as you say, like this genocidal, incredibly violent young girl who's just like, let's fucking kill them all. Fuck these alien bastards. There's definitely like a little bit of Chewatari Pan Lunch from Witch from Mercury. I think you could draw a line from Kasha to her. Kasha's more violent because she lives in a more violent world than Choo Choo does. But there's another version of Ideon where Kasha just fucking knocks a motherfucker out by decking him in the jaw. You know, like she is this incredibly violent person. But I do like that you get this insight to her. It's in the episode where her and Cosmo are locked up in the cage or whatever for insubordination. And you get this like little bit of the backstory of her having been an orphan, you know, and her like not having any kind of support, and she kind of was drifted to these migratory planets of the Solo ship, and this sense of that like she is this kind of lone wolf who doesn't know how to build any connections with anybody. And I love you have in the penultimate episode, you have that sequence of scenes where you have the three different romantic pairings of the show. You've got Bess and Karada, you've got Cheryl and Gijay. We talked about that moment already. But you also have Cosmo and Kasha, who are these like this unfulfilled romance, this sort of idea that like these two young people that do have a lot in common, that I think you can see a potential world where Cosmo and Kasha could have a relationship. And I think there's an implication that she's curious about him, but it never really goes anywhere. And you just have that scene of her falling asleep in the chair on the Ideon next to where Cosmo is, and him like standing over and looking at her tenderly, putting a blanket on her. And then later he makes the joke to Gijay about how like, it's like, oh, Cosmo, did you get any sleep? Yeah, I got a lot of great sleep. With Kasha, wink, wink, because literally he did sleep next to her. They were both sleeping on the bridge of the ship. And then Kasha comes on. It's like, fuck you, dude. Like, who the fuck would ever sleep with your ass, basically is what she says. And I do like the sort of like, that sense of there could be in some other world a relationship between these two, a connection between these two, but their world is too full of violence for that to ever be a thing that happens, sadly.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, but that whole dynamic, like they're on this line between, are they allies? Are they siblings? Are they lovers? Right? And that's a very dynamic thing they go through there, right?
Yes, but Kasha's just is too busy trying to murder all the Buff clan for any of that to happen.
Yes, absolutely. Who have we got next?
Then we got just like a whole, you know, who's just to run through some of the Solo ship. Most of these are not like major characters. We've got our engineer boy Jolliver, who we've talked about. Shiozawa Kaneto is the voice actor. He's also the narrator. I do like Jolliver gets his big moment. You know, because he's kind of like a Job John in the show, you know, like he's not like a main character, but he stands out with his blonde hair and his green jacket. But he does get his big moment in what is the final episode, technically, where he's transported along with Karada and gets in the fight with Karada's dad and all that. And it was nice to see Jolliver get a big little hero moment at the end of the show.
He also gets the last regular line of the show, other than Cheryl declaring they're all about to die. While they're in their little glowing orb, he says to Carla, if I'd known you were such a great person, I'd have asked you out before Bess did, which is such a Tomino romance line, right? It is like so weirdly like vulnerable a way to say that. And that is the last like normal human interaction on Ideon, because then everything goes crazy. But yeah, I a good little character. And Shiozawa, man, every time he comes up on Japanimation Station, I think you and I are just in awe of this guy's talent, and he died so young. It was so tragic. I know the entire voice acting world idolized this man, and just thought he was the best. And yeah, every time we run into him, he is indeed one of the best.
Yeah, it's just a super iconic voice. And even though Jolliver's not a huge role, like I get the sense that he was brought in probably more to be the narrator than he was to be Jolliver. And, you know, everybody plays like 5 different people on this show. It's that kind of thing where it's like everyone's a random Buff Clan dude at some point. But yes, I like Jolliver. Again, he's that like Astanagi in Zeta Gundam. It's that kind of background Tomino character that doesn't actually do all that much in the show, but you just like them and remember them anyways. And you're always happy when he pops up.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of these characters are like. So we also have Moeda. Moeda Fatum, I guess was his full name, voiced by Sasaki Hideki. You know, again, Moeda, not a huge character. He's the most like, I was, a month from retirement kind of thing in the show where the only time he, like, an episode is centered on him is the episode where he fucking dies, and you get the whole thing of him in FOD, of the little boy with the doll and the nurse.
Sean,
yeah.
I'm looking at my notes for that episode because this is a great episode, and his death scene is the one where Jupiter's rings blow up. It's phenomenal. Yes. But I wrote in my notes here, I'm writing like, okay, so Moira berates Fard for crying, tells him to be a man, and then I wrote in my notes, lots of focus on Moira. Is he about to die? And it is totally. He might as well have said, man, I'm about to leave the solo ship, and I got my yacht and my wife, and we're about to go sail around the Florida Keys, right? And no, he dies horribly.
Yes, but it's a very good episode, and it doesn't matter that it is a little bit obvious that they're playing the death card there with him, but it works well. Yes. And you got to pour one out for Moira. Feel bad for the nurse lady that they had a whole thing. Feel bad for Fod, who's a nice little kid. Moira, he was a real one.
Not related to the Moira conversation, but I just noticed this sentence in my notes, and it's from this episode, and I just have to read it out loud. Harulu orders Kurala to kill Rukuku. Wow, what a sentence. There's so many of those in here.
Because that's the one where he basically recreates the death of Giranzabi in that sequence, and then the lady assassin gets just fucking brutally murdered. They're like, this show gets pretty violent, and there's a shot where where they blow up the bridge, and she gets just bodied by this huge metal plate, and just blood splurts out, and she goes flying to the back of that room and crushed. And the show gets shockingly violent in places where it feels like Tomino got away with the decapitated fucking rocket launcher shot that kills Caecilia in Mobile Suit Gundam. He's like, how much more can I do? And that scene is a good example of what this is like. Fuck, Jesus, that's brutal. Yes. Then we've got our boy Dek Afta, and his pet squirrel that gets its own little special spacesuit, voiced by Matsuda Tatsuya, who was a prepubescent boy when they started production, became a pubescent boy during production, because he does his voice starts to change partway through production. There's 2 episodes where Dek is in the episode visually but is not voiced. Partially for those reasons that he was not kind of able to voice the character for a couple weeks. And then after that, you can hear his voice cracking, which is not a problem or anything, but it's one of those, it's so rare that you hear that in a show, because it's one of the reasons why you don't cast young boys as voice actors, or oftentimes as actors at all, is because to try to avoid that shift. But I think there's something about the rawness of the show that having Dek basically going through puberty partway through the show. They don't literally bring it into the show, but I think that performance kind of makes you feel that as he's becoming more of a quote unquote man, right? He's piloting along in the Ideon along with Cosmo, all that kind of stuff. And you have this kind of awkward boy with the voice cracking thing. It kind of works for me.
I think it works actually really well. I think it's such a real performance. Dek is such a cool character in that he goes from being just one of the kids in kind of the band of war orphans to being the co-pilot on the Ideon. And I love all of that. And I love, hearing his voice and how that evolves, because it just feels raw and real in a way that is effective. And I do just have to say, this is, I think, maybe Haro included, the best use of a mascot character in one of Tomino's shows. There's something about the absolute stone-faced unflappability of having a just crazy squirrel creature they made him a little spacesuit. Someone on the solo ship had to sew a little airtight spacesuit for this little squirrel. And there's a scene, even as dark as this show gets, it's like episode 37, they're getting sucked out into the blackness of space, and Cosmo saves the squirrel with the tips of his fingers, and they focus on it. And there's something about this show not flinching even a little bit between the abject darkness that is the substance of this show, but also Dek has a pet squirrel with his spacesuit, and it's never commented on. That gap is never conscious in the show. It's just part of what it is. And I love and respect that so deeply, and I think it's awesome. And in general, I actually think this show, of all of Tomino's shows that we've seen at least, that make use of having literal children on the ship, this is the best use of it so far. Mm-hmm. I think even Gundam included. And Gundam does very well with Kika Cats and Let's, obviously. But I think, one, because Piper Lou is obviously central to the entire theme and plot of the narrative. But the way Dek evolves, the way you see some of the other kids, the way you have Lotta being responsible for them, I just think the kids are integrated in a really great way in this show that is like so key to what the entire show is doing.
Yeah, it's a thing that like it gives you that sense of the life of these regular people on the ship, in that these kids have to find a way to make that do. And you have a couple of those episodes where they go out to try explore the dinosaur planet or whatever. That obviously, like, those kinds of plots stop happening more in the second half, where you can't have the kids go out and explore anything where they'll be brutally murdered somehow. But yes, yeah, I do like the kids a lot, and Deck as their kind of leader with his fun little squirrel buddy.
Fucking squirrel, I love him.
Yep. Speaking of that side of the show, we also have Yamada Eiko voicing Lotta Banda, which is one of those where I just desperately want to keep it in the order they do in the show, which is Banda Lotta, because when Karada says her name, it's always like really cool. I like Banda Lotta. Lotta obviously has her really big standout episode, which is, I think, one of my favorite episodes of the show. Episode 13, Shoot the Aliens, which is a great title for an episode that is about her trying to shoot the alien on the ship. And that's where I think this is another one that's storyboarded totally by Tomino. And I think Tomino must have been on some like the Third Man kick or something, because you have all these great shots of Karada being stalked through the body of the solo ship by Lotta, and you have these great shots. I put a couple of them in my notes because I just thought they were fantastic, of her with like this Luger looking like pistol, just like entering into frame, and it's just that. And I feel like you could just see, it cut, and you seeing Orson Welles' face behind the gun in the sewers or whatever in Third Man. It's got a very film noir-esque vibe to the way those shots are done, with all that stuff being intercut with, there's this whole crazy fight going out in space with Cosmo and all of them, and they're cutting back to Karada being stalked through the body of that ship, ultimately resulting in a just absolutely classic Tomino ending, where, and we talked about this earlier in my notes, that this ending was adjusted for the episode. The original outline had Cosmo stopping Lotta before she starts shooting at Karada, but instead she starts firing, she can't hit her, and then just keeps pulling the trigger on empty over and over again and collapses to the ground. And it's this episode that really brings those tensions of the first core of the show, which are all about the solo ship crew struggling to adjust to Karada and like bring her in and have her be a member of the crew, and having the idea that here you have this young girl who is like the most like kind, compassionate person on the ship. She's the caretaker for the children, all this stuff, and having her be the person who has this like deep-seated, unresolved hatred and anger and sorrow directed towards the Buff clan because of all the people who have been killed, like Piper Lou's mother, who you only see in the first episode, who dies off screen, like all these people's families, the parents of these children she's taking care of, all of them have died because of the idiotic violence of the Buff clan, and she just can't let that go until she expresses it in this incredibly violent moment. And it's a great scene because it resolves a lot of that tension, but also doesn't resolve it at the same time, which I think is very powerful. And you have this incredible line from Cosmo, where he looks at her, and it's a hard line to translate, but he says, "Minna rippa ni mieru," like they all look like proper, or they all look like respectable, like true adults. Is kind of what he's saying. Like Lotta and Karada, Bess and Cheryl also, they all look proper almost to the extent that it's sad. Like they all look like real adults is kind of what he's saying here, of that like they are all these kind of grown people dealing with these like truly complicated emotions, and there's something respectable about it, is the implication of the wording he uses. And it's a very Tomino line, because it's really hard to untool all the stuff he's saying there, because it's very strange. It's not how you would ever expect anybody to describe the situation Cosmo's looking at, but it's very evocative to the situation as it's unfolded.
The official subs, what they say there, and I think this at least gets that gap in expectation, is he says sincere. They all look so sincere, it makes me sad. I don't know if that fully captures the meaning, but that, again, it's like the word is unexpected, and I agree. I wrote in my notes, this is the most Tomino line ever. I wrote that a lot in this show, because this show is pure Tomino.
Yeah, because that word Bippa is like someone who's like has properly become the thing they're trying to be, like they fulfilled the responsibility they are, almost as like oftentimes how you will use that word. It's like a very strange line, and it's probably the most Tomino line of dialogue in this entire show.
Yeah, but and I also just want to shout out, like, Lotte is not a huge character, but Yamada Eiko was huge at this point.
Yeah,
because she's just coming off Anne of Green Gables in '79, which is really like where she fully breaks out. And from that point forward, I mean, one thing she's notable for is she is the go-to lead actor for every World Masterpiece Theater show at that point. But she's in lots of other stuff, so she's like a big actor to have on the cast. And this is her biggest episode, but she sells the hell out of that moment where she's saying the bullets won't come out, the bullets won't come out. You need a heavyweight to do that scene, and she's one of the best.
Yeah, and there is a moment in a later episode where she totally murders a Buff Clan dude who gets on the ship.
Yes.
And Lotta's a real one. Like, you don't want to fuck with her. She'll fucking kill you. Let's see, then we got Yokozawa Keiko, who is Lynn Formosa, Cheryl's sister. Yokozawa Keiko is also Shita from Laputa Castle in the Sky.
Just showed that to my students, great voice actress.
There you go. You see, no, she's Cheryl's sister from Space Runaway Ideon. You guys got to understand this. It's great.
Cheryl Formosa's sister, Lynn Formosa.
Exactly.
God, what a great name. Yeah.
Yeah. And Lynn, another character that's not like a huge member of the crew. She doesn't have like an episode that's about her other than the episode where she gets unfortunately murdered by other Earth people.
Yeah.
But is just another one of those like good presences on the ship, a good member of the overall crew and the whole cast of the show.
Yeah.
All right, and then we have our the other kids. You've got Takagi-sane as Fod, the adorable little kid with his stuffed animal. Sorry, Fod Malaka is his full name. And then the girl is Matsubara Masako playing Ursula Novak, which is one of my personal favorite.
I had no idea that was her name. I don't know if they ever say that, but it's so good.
Yes, very, very good. I love as we already talked about, the kids are very good on the show. And then you also have a voice actor I always love to see, Inoue Kazuhiko, at a very early performance. Obviously, everybody's favorite Naruto character, Kakashi. He's also Jared from Zeta Gundam for his other Tomino role, but he's in a million things. And he's Hatari Nabuel, who is the most Job John character in the show because he's the guy that's on the bridge that is like, has the little weird technical conversations with Bess. Not like a major character, but just a guy who's in every episode and constantly has like little things he has to say with Bess, who's just like your, technical dude who's standing around there. You do have my favorite scene with him is there's this great moment in an episode where Bess is looking at, there's like something happening outside. It's like, God, they need to go investigate to see if the Buff Clan around here. And then Hatari turns and says, they're already doing that. And he looks at it and says, oh, okay. And then it just cuts away. It's just like this amazing little interaction of like, why is this scene here? It's a Tomino storyboard episode. I don't remember exactly which one it was. I have to hunt through my notes. But I just love this, like, God, why aren't we investigating where all these damn Buff Clan are? It's like, they are investigating it. Oh, huh, okay. That's the whole interaction.
Yes. And then we do have, you noted her under others, but we do have Kitty Kitten. Ukai Rumiko, who was Frau Bo in Gundam, gets a much worse fate. Well, you know what? Frau Bo loses her entire family over the course of Gundam, so Frau Bo also has a sad fate. But Kitty Kitten just gets fucking brutally murdered in a very sad scene. Of course, she is Cosmo's love interest for those episodes because she has striking blue hair, he has striking red hair, and they just go together like peanut butter and jelly until the point where she is murdered by accident by, I think it's Darum.
Yes, Darum, who crash lands on the planet, and it's that whole ending. Like Kitty Kitten's death is incredibly well done.
Yes,
where you really don't see it coming because Darum has been shot down. He crash lands on the ship. Kitty Kitten is running through the fields trying to catch that one little kid who has like a fucking Colt 45 and is just running through the field to go kill the Buff Clan dude. And Darum stands up, sees her, fires his gun. Kills her, realizes in that moment, oh shit, she was a kid, and regrets what he's done, and then flies away. And it's just such a brutal moment, and that's where you get the third verse of the ending theme plays over her death, where the whole screen goes blue with this filter, and you get this great intercut between her as she's cradled in the grass, her dead body cradled in the grass, intercut with then Cosmo, who has been injured in the fight. He's back on the solo ship being treated. And this is where you have one of the most iconic moments in the series, which is where Karada donates her blood to Cosmo. And you have the shot of this top-down shot of the two of them in these two medical beds side by side with the red line of the connection to the blood connecting them. And the background fades away into the galaxy, which is this super potent shot demonstrating some of these central themes about like connection across these boundaries of race and culture and all these things, of that the solo ship is this melting pot of all these people, and that's something that should be impossible. It should not be possible for a Buff Clan person to be able to donate blood to a human, an Earth human as we know them. But I think there's this sort of narrative logic of, at this point, there is nothing separating these two people. They are of the same group. They are of the same broad family. So, of course, she can donate blood. But that sequence being intercut with Kitty Kitten's tragic death that Cosmo doesn't learn of until the beginning of the next episode is really, really powerful stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And so then you do have the various Buff Clan major characters. The first one you have here is Harulu, who she hasn't died yet at the end of the show, right? She gets away.
Well, not in so much as everybody's dead at the end of the show, but
right.
she is not dead. No, like Harulu is I think one of the characters most affected by not having the movie. Her and her dad, who's a really big character in the movie. But Harulu, voiced by Ichirusai Harumi, who you would know if you've seen City Hunter as Nogami Saiko, who's one of the main characters in that series. And Haradu is, of course, our fetish Tomino character. This is the, like, I liked Kotosu, so let's, like, get a new Kotosu. There's a lot of very lovingly framed shots of Haradu where her head is leaned slightly back and the camera's at, like, a slight low angle. It's, like, how she's introduced, and Tomino keeps coming back to the shot, because it's the first time you see it is in episode 11, because I screenshotted it, because I'm like, I know this is how he always shoots this character. And that is a Tomino storyboarded episode, and every time they come back to her, they always come back to this shot, like showing her kind of neckline and her sharp angular jaw. I think there's something that Tomino's found something there that he keeps loving to come back to. But yes, Haradu, a character I really love, but also one I think is just really suffers by her conclusion is just not in the show. Like, she's just this weird character hanging on the side who, after Dadam dies, she's mostly exited the show, other than when she sends that assassin, and you have a couple of moments building up to what her role is going to be in the finale, but you don't actually get there in the show.
Right. So, yeah, like, I don't know if I have a ton more to say about her, and obviously this is just one where it's probably best for us to put a pin in it and move on. We already talked about Gijay. Darum, I think, also is in probably the put a pin in it and move on, although it's a very good performance. It's Kihara Shojiro, who plays Shalia Bull on Gundam, and it's a very striking performance. I do just want to say one last time about another character you have listed here, Damido Vetch, who's voiced by Ginga Banjo. That probably is, like, my biggest single criticism with the show, feeling where it's a little shaggy dog, is that I found that character so striking. The Ginga Banjo performance is so good. It does feel like they're building to something. And I think there's utility in the way he is taken out in kind of what the show is doing as a Trojan horse. But it is also one where I just felt like there was plot that felt missing, because I found the character very striking. And maybe if I watched the show again knowing where that was going, I wouldn't feel that. But that was just my one note.
Yeah, because I do think that Damido, a lot of, like, the scheming within the Buff Clan is all kind of centered around Damido, who's, like, manipulating things to try to get up in the world and stuff. And yeah, I do agree that, like, either he should have just been killed off the moment he gets injured and exits the show, rather than bringing him back to have kill him off again in an episode, like several episodes later, or have him become another, like, a more major figure again. And I think, like, the where they land where he comes back but then dies immediately just is a bit awkward.
Yeah. All right, but now you want to finish this section with just a list of great Tomino names?
Yes, so for this one, we don't have to talk about the characters. Let's just go through the names here. So I've got my Buff Clan commanders that I went through, and let's just appreciate these names. So you've got Abadede Guramade. Just fantastic. It sounds like it could be an Italian dish or something, like it should go to...
Abadede Gurimade.
Yes, exactly. Like, I'm watching an episode of The Sopranos, and Tony goes to the restaurant, and it's like, hey, give me an Abadede Guramade here. That kind of thing. You've got Gubaba Geba. which is so good.
Give me my gabagool and my goo gabba gabba.
I think you might have to cut that for our Italian-American listeners, Jonathan. I think you just said something very racist.
It's okay.
Yeah. You also have Guldebra Dran, who both of those are voiced by the same guy. Guldebra Dran is just in one episode, but he's the guy who takes the hostages on planet Ajian. You've got Gal Babagura. I think we talked about him before. He's the one with the dancer fiance. You've got, I love this, Gyamis Ragu, or if you want to like really to go with the food theme, Gyamis Ragu, if you want to really lean into it. And the Italian dishes here. One of the best ones, this is a character I really loved, is Ginda Tesho, who's just a great, all-time great voice actor. He voices Hannibal Gin, who he is like the most effective of all of the Buff Clan commanders. He's the one who makes the ally with the Earth Commander. And one of the saddest episodes, when the solo ship realizes that the fucking humans and the Buff Clan have joined forces against them, is a real knife twist. That's very sad. But that's because Hannibal Gin, living up to his historical reference point, Hannibal is a very powerful commander and very brilliant commander. Then we've got Duka Kukiru, who you referred to earlier. He's the one lady commander who comes in. And then my last one here for the Buff Clan is Gindoro Jinbu, who he's the weird old guy from the Ohm Foundation who's in like the last 2 episodes. That is another character that just, without the movie, you're just, who the fuck is this weird old dude who's here with the Buff Clan at the end? But he is Gindoro Jinbu is what his name is.
And then you've got a couple of other great Tomino names that come up here and there. Franklin Marshall, just A+ trying to come up with an American name. I love it. Because he's just supposed to be an American dude. But yeah. Mac Jordan, Limiter Friendali, and Kamala Lanban, which we already talked about. But yes, these are so good. And you could do, you know how actors do all of their vocal exercises with like their like tongue twisters? You could do that with Abadere Gurimade, Gubabageba, Galbabagura, Gamus Ragu. Just go through those a couple of times and you are warmed up and ready to go.
Yeah, it's like, man, Tomino was really on something when he was coming up with the Buff Clan names, because they are absolutely wild. And I do have to personally shout out that one of my favorite names is Mac Jordan, father of Bess Jordan, is just, it's a really good name. It's got real Jimba Ral, father of Ramba Ral energy, you know?
Yeah.
He's only in one episode, but I really like Mac Jordan.
Fantastic. All right. So this episode is long already.
Yes.
And I think there are certain conversations we can clearly table for the next one. Like, I think you and I could have a whole thematic conversation about the E-Day and what it represents and all of that. But I don't think we should yet, right? Like, that's a conversation for next time. The conversations we probably do want to have for now are, like, just to focus us as we end up here, any final, like, striking scenes from episodes we want to note, and I think talking about how this show specifically ends. Does that sound right?
Yes. Yeah, because I definitely have a couple of moments near the end, before we talk about the actual ending, which obviously we need to do. One scene I really love is, because, and I know that this is different in the compilation movie, is episode 34, Where the Meteor Falls, where this is where Bess has fallen ill, and in kind of reflection of Captain Bright has a similar arc in Gundam, but then he has this vision where he seemingly communicates with the E-Day, and this is a different scene in the movie. I know that it's Cosmo instead, but you just have this great trippy visuals. And I have some of the dialogue here where he's talking to the E-Day. By the way, the E-Day voice is Tesho Ginda. So again, just all-time great voice actor voice here. The E-Day says, "I'm the accumulation of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of consciousnesses. I will defend my existence as well." Defend. And then Bess replies, "People are the source of wisdom and conscience. Does the E-Day exist to kill people?" The E-Day responds, "I have the right to defend the rightful habitat of the spirit, the place of E-Day." Bess says, "Why do you allow people to keep fighting each other?" The E-Day responds, "I ask this, why do you hate each other?" "We don't hate each other." "Why are you not wise enough to see the outcome?" "Outcome? Are you making this happen? Testing us?" "We do not possess such power. We are but ourselves, a single being." "If we both are suffering, we ought to use all of our strength to find the righteous path." "A power such as that Demonstrate your true strength. The power of the will should cross even dimensions. And then his dream explodes into the cosmos, where you see his spirit being dragged through things. And he's being dragged towards the representation of the Ide. And then Bess shouts out, "I'm not a part of you. I am me. I am my own self." And then his spirit turns around and flies back towards this astral projection of the solo ship, with the implication of the scene to me being that Bess was on the verge of death. He was going to be absorbed into the consciousness of the Ide. And then his will shouts out and he decides he has to come back to the solo ship. But it's just very evocative, very bizarre scene with really strange visuals of Bess on the bed, like naked, with shadows dropping across his man bits, so you don't get the censors too bothered with it. But with weird like veins, just sort of like drawn across his body in this kind of off blue color. There's like that sense of him being absorbed or pulled into the Ide as he's trying to converse with it before he glows and explodes and comes back to the solo ship. It's a very, very evocative scene to me.
Oh, it's a tremendous scene. And part of it is that, so this is episode 34, which is the episode where you have, I think it's Hannibal at this point, is trying to get them onto this planet with the Domo creatures, who are the giant sandworms from Empire Strikes Back. It is, other than this scene, I think the most unremarkable episode of this home stretch. Like, it is more formulaic, it doesn't have a lot, but I think that's kind of intentional. It is this kind of like by-the-numbers story of the week, and then this happens. You are at your most like unsuspecting that this scene is going to happen. And Tomino Yoshiyuki has referenced the movie 2001 a lot in his work. You get that in the Cosmic Glow scene in Mobile Suit Gundam. You get that, there's an earlier episode where they're on the ape planet and it's just all 100% taken from the 2000, even just the way the orange sunset is just taken from the matte paintings in that section of 2001.
I mean, one of the apes has the bone, which is a piece of animation that they reuse in the ending, where they half play it and they play it back in reverse so he doesn't like totally throw the bone over his shoulder. So yes, it is a very blatant 2001 reference.
But this scene, I think, is the most interesting of his 2001 interpolations, because it's doing a lot of that stuff like a Cosmic Glow. It's doing very clearly with Bess being in a reclined position on the bed, kind of looking up. It's very similar to the end of 2001 when he's in that like weird hotel room and the obelisk appears and all of that stuff. So it's pulling from that. The whole sort of like projection through the cosmos. But it also feels like this is adding in Tomino's own kind of experimental language and his interest in these like ideas of collective will and consciousness and astral projection and all of that. So no, it's one of the best scenes in the entire series.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really fucking cool. Another scene kind of like that around this stretch that I also want to shout out is it's from episode, 36, Farewell Solo Ship, which one is just a great episode. That episode is a very Tomino episode where it starts with them just putting bombs all over the interior of the solo ship, and it does not explain to you why they're doing that for like 5 minutes. It's such a Tomino episode. But this is the scene that I really want to shout out, is the bomb detonation moment where they've gone back onto the solo ship, they're trying to remove all of the bombs, and then when the bombs go off, you have this just incredible moment where it's almost like it's like a vector game in terms of the way it's representing the image, where you have a black background that pulses black to red, and then you have just white outlines of the characters, which is what makes it look like a vector game. If you've ever seen one of those in old arcades, and you just get, that's with all the different characters, this moment where the bombs are meant to explode. Then you get this one shot as it's going through all the characters, that you have the kids, and then Piper Lou, and like just like what looks like a paper cutout of Piper Lou. It's like a cell. It's not animating. Just darts across the screen, but he's in full color. Then you get this outline of Karada in the nude, who dashes across the screen in this golden color. You get the Ideon gauge. You get everybody like a close-up on all of their faces. And then you get the super close-up where it's just the eyes and the outline of the nose of Gijay. Then you get it of Cosmo and Kasha, that their eyes and eyebrows, which are on top of each other, they blink once. And then the bomb explodes and gets contained by the Ide, with, of course, the ultimate reveal being they can't blow up the ship. They can't destroy the Ideon. They can't even fucking die if they wanted to, because the Ide will stop them. And this moment of like how dramatic it plays this, with this crazy red pulsing background and weird white outlines, the close-up on this like abstract representation of their eyes at this moment where they're clearly going to die horribly, and then it just doesn't happen, is such a masterstroke of a moment.
It's phenomenal. I wrote in my notes that it feels like this is a visual experiential representation of space and time folding in on itself,
yes.
Right? And I also think, even though this is a scene about them all surviving, it feels the closest I've seen to a visual representation of how Tomino writes the scene in the third Gundam novel where Amuro dies and his consciousness goes out and affects everyone else, which is obviously not what happens in the TV show, but this is just in the book. And like the way that language is used and everything, this is the kind of imagery I very much imagine he would have had in his head for that scene. And that's part of what makes it so striking.
Yeah. So I think those are the big ones I wanted to get. Were there any
and
other
this is the episode also where, no, this is very much the episode where I wrote in my notes, oh, this is a horror show, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I think that's where they realize they're trapped. They're trapped for good. They can't even kill themselves. They are purely in the will of the Ideon, which leads us to our final couple episodes where they just kind of have to surrender to that will, and then it murders them all? ?
Yes. So we get our final episode here, episode 29, You in the Cosmos, or it's the same title as the ending theme, however you want to translate it, where, again, for context, this episode is... Everything is exactly just what the script for episode 39 was, up until the moment when Karada's father, the head commander of the Buff Clan, orders them to pursue the solo ship as it's escaping. And that's where you then get the narration come in and say, and it was at that moment that the Ide manifested. And then you get a very trippy series of images where you have Karada in the nude with light emanating from her stomach or, her womb, right? At this point, we know that she's pregnant with Bessa's child. You have Cheryl, whose face is half cast in red, who's like embracing this is the moment, like the Ide is coming. You have these like reactions from everybody. Then a massive light envelops the solo ship, which then zooms out and consumes the whole screen. You have this very interesting trippy image of where it's almost like the Brady Bunch opening or something, but it's like strips of images of the characters, but it's two. There's like a close up, and then somewhere else there's a like slightly like more pulled out version of the shot. You get it for Bess, then you get it for Kasha, and they're kind of filling in different quadrants of the screen. Then you get only one for Karada, which is just a close-up for Karada. You get Cosmo, you get Cheryl, then you get all of those together to create one single image with all of these different close-ups for the characters. But notably, there's 3 that are not filled in, which is interesting to me. You get Karada's dad, a close-up on him. Then you get the explosion from Karada's womb, with some dialogue and some narration, including the main piece of narration that I think is very like what the ending is trying to communicate, which is, and perhaps both the people of Earth and the Buff Clan were scattered into the plane of karma, the ends of the universe, which reflects a line of dialogue from earlier in the episode that Cosmo is talking about. And that's where you get these shots of the different planets, like the 8th planet, a lot of it reusing animation from those episodes with a ghostly image of the solo ship soaring across the sky. You go to the weird sandworm planet. You then get a same visual as what we got with the comets being produced in the solo ship's trail, and they're like shooting all across the universe and coming together. You then get a shot of the Milky Way galaxy from the distance. You then get naked Piper Lou soaring into frame with a like stardust of a trail of stardust behind him, and then you get the image of the unborn infant child of Bess and Karada. That at this point, I might as well mention that if you look at the credits, you will know that baby is called the Messiah. So that's maybe a thing to throw in here as well. That will come up in the movie as well. And then you get a even bigger distance shot of the Milky Way galaxy with trails of light shooting out from it. And that is what closes out the TV show version of Space Runaway Ideon. Thoughts, Jonathan?
Once again, I think it's very funny, all the Americans who have seen Neon Genesis Evangelion and not any of the shows that were that influenced Neon Genesis Evangelion, and are like, man, it's crazy that EVA was the first show ever to have an ending that wasn't fully articulated, and then did a movie that fully articulated the intention of the TV show ending. And I'm like, guys, Anno himself would be the first to tell you, no, I didn't come up with that. I was working off of Space Runaway Ideon.
Yes.
Because that's so this is so similar. It's hilarious to me. Like, now, EVA is a slightly different scenario where EVA has 2 full episodes that are this sort of like different, lower, more not lower in a bad way, but just like lower level of production, abstract version of the ending. And then End of EVA is the full bombastic, articulation of that ending. So it's not 1-to-1, but it's pretty fucking close.
Yes, it's very similar.
Especially in that, like, from everything you just described, Sean, I cannot tell you firmly what is supposed to have happened there, because there's no way to know from these 2 minutes of footage firmly what has happened, right? Is that supposed to be the soul of Piper Lou, or is that literally Piper Lou becoming like the space baby from 2001? I don't know. And if you tell me you think you really do know from those 2 minutes, you're lying. It's not that kind of ending, right? Yeah. What I wrote in my notes, Sean, is that this feels like the bad ending in a visual novel, like we missed a prompt or an option somewhere, and it's going to send us back to the main menu, and I'm going to start again from the point where, like, the Ideon is going to reach for Karala before her ship blows up, right? Like, that is what this is. It is like in a tight, especially like I think of like a Tight Moon novel like Fate's Day Night or Tsukihime or something, like, oh no, I missed something, everyone's dead, I have to go back and, because like this is hinting at clearly the show was going in a direction similar to this, but this is not the full version of the ending yet. I missed something. Now I need to go back and get the full version of the ending.
Yes, yeah, very much. It does feel like, you're playing Persona 3, and then you just decide, oh, we gotta kill Yoji, and then all of a sudden it skips 5 months or whatever, and you're like, oh, it's graduation, weird. I mean, I guess the difference here is that it is, without giving away too much, like, it is trying to express ideas that are in the movie, because obviously, like, the whole show is arriving at this point of what does it mean for the Ide to manifest or for it to be invoked, or whatever verb you want to use. Hatsudo is the word used in Japanese that makes the subtitle of the second movie. But like, what is that? How does it happen? What are the consequences of that? Can we have that happen and have it be influenced by like the good righteous will of well-minded people? Is it an evil power? Is it neither of those two things, right? It's like a big question that the series investigates. And I'm not even going to tell you that when we watch the movie that you will have like a clear, this is exactly what all this means kind of answer that question, in the same way that you do not have that from watching the end of Evangelion, from the ending of the original TV show. You just have like more information to build your idea of what all this stuff represents and means. But yes, this is like we're trying to, it's like we typed the idea for what is the ending of the show into ChatGPT to try to make it a 3-sentence summary and like just throw it in there at the end and reuse a lot of animation that they already had existing to make it happen. And I'm honestly kind of shocked by how like it doesn't fully work, obviously. And there are like notable characters that just do not have conclusions. Like Cheryl's story arc is clearly not done. Honestly, Karada's character arc is not totally done. Haruru's character arc very much is not done. Doba, the main bad guy at the ending, the Karada's father, he's got a whole story arc that is just, he's a character introduced almost in this episode. You see him, I think, once earlier. But he's a really major figure that it's weird that he would just be in this one episode and that's it. So there's obviously like big hanging things not finished yet. And yet, especially as someone who's seen the movie, there is something about the like, it kind of makes sense to me, the idea of that the Ide is trying to test people. It has crafted this whole scenario. It has, literally plucked Karada and Jolliver, who is along for the ride. Poor Jolliver. He has no reason to have this happen to him. But both of them get plucked by the Ide, deposited at the feet of Karada's father as this test to see, can humanity overcome all these evils that plague them? And when that doesn't happen, especially when Doba takes the order, chase after them, hunt them down, and kill them, that's when the Ide is like, well, fuck, okay, and then it activates, and what that exactly means is very vague. But there is something I think it is like it it exists enough within the logic and the framework of what the show has presented us that it works better as an ending than it has any right to be, even if it's not a good ending on its own.
I think I agree with that. It is certainly a very striking and memorable ending, and it is, hey, Tomino, he's kill 'em all Tomino. He killed them all. Every fucking one of them. That squirrel in the suit, he's gone. They're all gone. I do think it is worth asking the question, and I don't have an answer to this yet because I haven't seen the movie. Obviously, you, Sean Chapman, are inevitably looking at this because you have also seen the movie, so it reads onto it. If they never got to make the movie, if fate intervened in such a way that the movie never happened, do you think it would have been better to do, and so all we have is 39 episodes, do you think it would have been better to do this sudden ending, or just have episode 39 end as it was going to, and let us imagine the rest? It's a genuine question for me because it's so jarring and weird. And as a, visual novel fake ending, now let's go see the real one, I'm totally cool with it. And this is always the question with canceled TV shows. There's no right answer, because if you don't have time to finish your story, do you just leave it hanging and say, you know what, we made the thing we planned to make as far as we could and now we're good? Or do you try to tack something on at the end, very last minute? I think this is a fairly artful version of that, and clearly, as you say, it is coming from, the moment the E-Day manifests is the thing we are building towards. That is impossible to miss. But it's an interesting question, right?
Yeah, I think for this show, I think this is the better alternative. I just don't think Ideon is the kind of show that it would work to have, this end, because I think it would basically, in that scenario, it would end with the solo ship in space around the giant capital I-shaped crazy Death Star-esque crazy ship that Doba's in. I'm trying to remember how the movie goes. I don't remember if the solo ship actually escapes or not. I mean, they keep on fighting on this big crazy ship. I don't remember if they move somewhere else and it continues. So maybe it would be they death drive out and then Doba says chase them. Or maybe it more kind of ends with and now the final battle's going to begin. Those are one of the two sort of things. But they're in the same location. And I don't think that would play, because I do think you need to have some last moment of what the E-Day is doing, and having the E-Day, again, just having the E-Day manifest in some way just kind of has to happen for the show to have any sense of a narrative completeness and a thematic statement to it that is actually making that kind of point it's trying to land at, even if that point is very hard to articulate based just on the information that this ending is giving you. I think if it was just left purely hanging, I don't think there's a version of this show that has an ending of, and the adventure continues, and you imagine what that looks like. I do feel like Ideon, and maybe this is me just biased because I know how all these things go, I feel like Ideon needs to have a very definitive ass ending, in the way that Neon Genesis Evangelion kind of has to. Eva could not have ended with, and they will continue to battle more angels in the future that shall come to Earth. It's just not a series that can possibly do that, in the way that, lots of other kinds of shows are fine with, we didn't get to the end of the full plot, but the idea of they sail off and the battle goes another day, like the ending of Angel, the TV show, or something like that, which they very famously had a finale that ended up being one of those. I don't think Ideon could rest with an ending like that.
No, and obviously there is no perfect solution here, because they had a different ending written, right? So there's no way to do it perfectly. But I just think it's I think I agree with everything you're saying. I just think it's an interesting question worth pondering, because it's a fascinating thing, and mostly I just want to finish this podcast so that I can go watch the movie and see how it actually ends. Before we wrap up though, Sean, I have one last topic we do have to address on this episode. Okay. Which is that the way hyperspace is depicted in this show. For one, they have the whole thing of the hyperspace drive is called the DS drive, is how it's written out, but they say it as death drive, which sounds like they are saying the English term death drive, which is the Freudian concept of in psychoanalysis. Yes. In the early episodes of Ideon, hyperspace is also depicted. Now, they don't do this near the end. They change this for obvious reasons at a certain point. But in the first 10 episodes or so, hyperspace is always depicted as this swirling mass of white objects that are thin on one end and bulbous on the other end. So they look like sperm. It looks like they are flying through a cloud of sperm. If you told me this is the episode of the Magic School Bus where Miss Frizzle takes them into the testes and shows them where sperm are made, that is what it looks like. It looks like they are flying around in a world of sperm. And it is not subtle. It is not me reading into it. That is what it looks like. And they are constantly saying what sounds like the words death drive. And I also have to say, Mr. Ano Hideaki himself could not come up with a more Freudian set of sounds and images than all of the hyperspace battle scenes in Ideon of people going around yelling death drive while sperm just circle their ship around them.
I gotta say, Jonathan, I think I think you working in film studies has poisoned your mind. I'm being totally honest. It did not occur to me to read those as sperm. I always registered those as being like souls, that they look like the Japanese representation of like a soul that's traveling through space that's, white with like a big tail, like it's a ghost kind of thing. And maybe that's me knowing something like the Tomino, or not Tomino, but like the Ideon kind of weird representations of things, that I would see this like, oh, it almost looks like souls. I don't know what they're supposed to be. Maybe it is supposed to be crazy psychoanalysis bullshit and it's supposed to be sperms, or maybe you've just got sperm on your mind. I don't know.
Well, okay, we all always have sperm on our mind, don't we? But that sounded weird. Anyway, this is what it is to talk about psychoanalysis. But like, it is a show about this idea of like collective consciousness and like something being birthed. I mean, the show ends with also like this source from the womb emitting this explosion that ends the world and starts a new one. And just, I don't know, like particularly, what are they supposed to be? It's DS drive, but they say des. It's like, it's yes. A really weird word. And there was just something about that combination because the imagery is so heavy in those early episodes of what hyperspace looks like, the amount they're saying the word. I'm not like saying this to say like Tomino clearly wrote down in his planning documents, we're going to go Freudian as fuck, death drive plus sperm equals Ideon in one of his crazy like graphs. But it is something where, like, me, film studies boy, looks at this and goes, I can't ignore this. If I wrote, my dissertation on Ideon, I'd have to have at least a chapter on the fucking sperm death drive imagery. It's impossible.
So I can confirm, Jonathan, that, confirm's not the right word. I can clarify for you, if you're curious what the DS drive is it stands for Dimension Space Drive. Because of course, what it does is it transmits you to the Akukan, or the subspace, that they can use as, to travel through space at faster than light because it warps the dimensions of space itself.
It's the world where all is possible and everything is, just beginning, which is like sperm.
Exactly, So it's the dimension space drive. That's what I've always called my penis, so it all makes sense. We can't end the episode with that. Next week, Jonathan, we are going to finish our conversation with Space Runaway Ideon. We will clarify all of these things and more. There is stuff I want to say about the ending that maybe could connect to some of these thoughts, but we can't go there yet. So let's table our Freudian readings. Let's put that aside for next week's episode, where we will be discussing both the movies, the Ideon Contact and the Ideon Be Invoked. And I am very excited, Jonathan, for you to invoke even more sexual psychoanalytic literature.
信じほど美しい時代ない